Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Barbara Mullenix. Have you done everything right in your life? Most likely, many will say yes. The lives of the figures in today's story resemble a madhouse. Since its inception, alcohol has remained the most commonly used psychoactive substance. It is not surprising that alcoholic drinks destroy families, destinies, and even lives. Barbara Mullenix was born on May 29, 1950, in Munich, Germany. She spent her childhood there and was described as an ordinary child from a family slightly above the middle class. By the age of 18, Barbara got married. She always dreamed of starting a family, but from the very beginning, it was far from ideal. In particular, the strong-willed Barbara turned out to be far from the ideal wife her boyfriend wanted. She was very hot-tempered. After that, she moved to the USA. In total, she went through 3 marriages, all of which ended in divorce. After her early relationships, Barbara had 2 sons, who had already left home by the time of that events. Only her 17-year-old daughter, Rachel, remained living with her. Rachel was born during Barbara's 3rd marriage to Bruce, a man who turned out to be 9 years younger than Barbara. The entire family settled in Oakland, Oklahoma, USA. Bruce was initially attracted to Barbara's vibrant personality, but just as quickly as it drew him in, it began to repel him. A typical cycle of Barbara's relationship problems began to repeat itself. Rachel, born in 1989, became a guiding star for Barbara, as she had always wanted to have a daughter. During this period, her daughter was treated like a princess, and she willingly took advantage of this. Rachel was given the largest bedroom, the best outfits, and extravagant parties for her birthdays. At a young age, she convinced her parents to enroll her in a special private school that required attendance only once a week, allowing her to enjoy a relatively easy life. Rachel was a good student, very athletic and active. She participated in inter-school basketball championships, attended ballet classes, and practiced gymnastics. However, despite all of this, her parents faced major problems. Barbara struggled with alcoholism for a long time, and after Rachel turned 10, her drinking became noticeably worse. According to Rachel's memories, Barbara became a severe alcoholic who verbally and physically attacked her husband and daughter whenever she drank. Once she touched a glass, she would become aggressive. She could grab them by the hair and hit them. This resulted in police being called to their home several times due to domestic violence. The first incident occurred in 2002 when the police found 12-year-old Rachel crying on the street, showing a bite mark allegedly left by her mother. The police reports indicated several bite marks on her back that the girl clearly could not have inflicted on herself. However, she later admitted that she made up the story and asked the authorities not to press charges against her mother. She probably didn't want Barbara to suffer. After such outbursts of aggression, Barbara would often apologize to her family members. When she wasn't drinking, even her ex-husbands described her as kind and sociable. However, all this changed radically once Barbara started drinking again. Her relationships with men fell apart for the same reasons, either due to her alcoholism or the aggression stemming from her difficult temperament. When Rachel turned 13, Bruce, tired of the situation, decided to end the marriage and moved to Newport Beach, California, in search of work. Barbara then decided to move to Tampa, Florida. Typical divorce proceedings soon arose. It was difficult for they to agree on many things. They didn't want to prolong the process. Ultimately, they suggested that their daughter choose with whom she wanted to stay. This was a difficult period for Rachel, as the answer to such questions became too much for her to handle. Her parents ended up in different states, making it difficult for her to visit either parent. In the end, Rachel chose to stay with her mother and moved to Tampa, and her father had to pay child support. This decision shocked Barbara's friends, who were aware of the addiction and believed that this story could not end well. Exactly, the first incidents of trouble soon followed. In 2004, the Tampa police received a call from the home where Barbara and Rachel lived. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, they found a woman in tears. She was very nervous and shaking all over. There were injuries on her body, some of which she clearly could not have inflicted on herself. Barbara was reluctant to communicate with the police, answering questions in monosyllables, but from her words, it was clear that these injuries were inflicted by her daughter, Rachel. At the time of the police's arrival, the teenager had run away from home. One of the arriving officers called Rachel on her mobile phone. She immediately answered and admitted that there had been a quarrel with her mother before leaving. They had fought, and after that, Rachel hung up. In response to subsequent calls, she refused to answer. Ultimately, there was no formal complaint. Barbara refused to press charges against her daughter, and the case was hushed up. Incidents provoked earlier by Barbara in fits of alcoholic aggression ended in exactly the same way. During this period, Barbara continued to drink, and it seemed that the situation was worsening. She did not work, and they lived on benefits and alimony from Rachel's father, but there was clearly not enough money. By 2005, all this led to the fact that she could not pay the rent, which was high. When they were notified of this and given a day to pack, Rachel called her father in Newport Beach and asked if he could shelter her and her mother for a while until Barbara could recover from another binge and get back on her feet. Bruce doubted that contacting his ex-wife again was a good idea, but there was no other way out. Rachel was very convincing and used a trick. She told her father that if he could not shelter them both, they would be forced to look for other housing and would not go to him. Apparently, Bruce really wanted his daughter to come to him, so he agreed to these conditions. Rachel later admitted that she understood that without her, her mother would slide into a marginal lifestyle completely and have no way out. In the hope of saving her mother, she made this decision from the beginning. Barbara understood perfectly well that her ex-husband would be against it, so she was grateful to her daughter for her help. After receiving permission from Bruce, both packed their things and went to California. Newport Beach is now one of the richest and most prosperous communities in the United States, located south of Los Angeles. It has many beaches and premium real estate. Bruce owned an apartment there. In such areas, the crime rate is usually low, and violent attacks are committed extremely rarely, as criminal elements typically seek to profit. Unfortunately, with Barbara's arrival, the situation clearly became tense, which greatly upset Bruce. Despite the fact that the former spouses lived in separate rooms, they almost immediately began to quarrel. For Rachel, this move became an excellent opportunity to get to know the social life of the elite area of America. In any case, she and Barbara were focused on succeeding in the film industry to become famous. Barbara had already taken the first steps toward this dream. She got a job as an assistant on a set, actively attended castings, and made acquaintances. Everything went on as usual until May 2006, when the 17-year-old girl met a young man at a party. He was described as a quiet, athletic guy from a good family, good-natured and hardworking. During this period, he worked full-time, supported himself, was focused on his career and family. A romantic relationship quickly blossomed between them, and soon Rachel introduced him to her family. From the very beginning, the 4-year age difference worried both her mother and father, but after getting to know the young man better, they saw that their daughter had chosen a decent guy who treated her well. They hoped that Rachel would choose this good young man. However, Barbara soon began to exhibit flashes of jealousy. It seemed as though she felt offended by the guy because he was taking up all of Rachel's free time. Rachel practically no longer devoted herself to her relationship with her boyfriend and pushed her dreams about Hollywood into the background. Now, it became obvious that Rachel was not interested in work. Hormones had completely turned her head. Barbara continued to pursue her acting career and even landed a small role in the series CSI, Crime Scene Investigation. The character appeared in one of the episodes in a secondary role, and Barbara was waiting for new opportunities. Considering the age difference between the young couple, Rachel needed official permission from her parents to engage in a relationship with him. However, she was skilled at manipulating her mother and father, often giving them ultimatums. This is likely how she coerced them into signing a document granting their permission. From that point on, the couple could calmly meet. With the high school girl always having this permission to prevent her boyfriend from facing any legal issues regarding the corruption of minors, as specified by law. At the same time, Rachel managed to negotiate very favorable conditions for this agreement. The only stipulation was a curfew set at 1 a.m. However, as practice showed, even this became too serious a restriction for the rebellious Rachel. On August 31, 2006, Rachel accidentally fell asleep at her boyfriend's house and missed curfew. Barbara was furious. Unable to reach her daughter by phone, she went to Ian Allen's house at around 2 o'clock in the morning. Once there, she began knocking on the door, screaming and raising everyone's alarms. She forcibly pulled Rachel out of the house and forbade her from seeing Ian. This was shocking for Rachel, but for a while, Ian and Rachel decided to take a break. 10 days after this conflict, Rachel wrote in her diary that her relationship with her mother had deteriorated to its historical minimum. She openly called her mother a psychopath and reported that she heard threats from Barbara every day. Rachel expressed regret for not leaving for Tampa with her father back then and hoped that Barbara would calm down so that things could return to normal. However, things did not improve. On September 13, 2006, a yacht left Newport Harbor, and the captain noticed something suspicious in the water. He saw a large, tightly sealed cardboard box floating past the ship and thought to himself that it looked like a coffin. Pushing away dark thoughts, he pulled out the suspicious object only to discover the body of a woman wrapped in a bloody sheet. He reported this gruesome find to the Coast Guard. When police officers arrived on the scene, they counted 52 stab wounds to the face, neck, upper body, and back. The most disturbing detail was a knife sticking out of one eye, along with another smaller bloody knife wrapped in the same sheet, which still had remnants of the victim on it. A third knife was simply discarded in the box. All three were ordinary kitchen tools from the same set. The body was sent for an autopsy, where the medical examiner found that 2 of the numerous stab wounds were fatal, having cut the jugular vein and carotid artery. Each of these wounds could have killed the victim within minutes without immediate medical assistance, leaving no chance of survival. The examiner concluded that she had been killed on the evening of September 12, less than a day before the yacht owner's call. The victim remained unidentified until the medical examiner discovered breast implants, each assigned a serial number at the factory, which could be used similarly to dental records. This led the police to identify the victim as Barbara Mullenix. They quickly located the deceased. Detectives went to the house where Barbara lived with her daughter and ex-husband. When the investigators arrived, the house was empty. They began inspecting the territory, and by that time, Bruce had driven up to the house. He stated that he had been on a business trip for several days, about a 2-hour drive from home, and had returned less than an hour ago. According to him, he had not yet seen his daughter or ex-wife, as he had gone to the store for groceries upon his return and had not managed to contact them yet. He confirmed that both of their mobile phones were silent, which he found strange, but he didn't think much of it, assuming they were busy with their own affairs and would return home later. The detectives spoke with Bruce. They learned that he and Barbara had a rather complicated relationship. Despite being divorced, they had been living together again at their daughter's request. The atmosphere in the house was tense, particularly regarding Rachel's relationship with her boyfriend, which worried her parents. Bruce cited Barbara's alcohol addiction and violent behavior while intoxicated as the main reasons for their divorce. He also admitted that Barbara occasionally used illegal substances, further aggravating her behavior. Soon, Bruce became a prime suspect, as he had a possible motive and could have provoked the circumstances leading to the attack. Given that they were discussing a premeditated murder, it was highly probable that the killer should be sought within the victim's immediate environment. Authorities quickly noticed that Bruce did not seem very upset by the news of Barbara's death. He either skillfully concealed his feelings or, most likely, felt more empathy than negativity. Bruce cooperated with the investigation and allowed the apartment to be inspected. During the search of Barbara's bedroom, investigators found a small imprint on the wall that resembled a smeared trace of a bloody hand. In the kitchen, a bucket contained a sponge with suspicious dark spots and a latex glove. It was evident that the hallway had been cleaned. On the table, there was a knife set missing several items that were identical to those found with the victim. With all these facts in mind, suspicions against Bruce grew. The police arrested him and took him to the station for questioning. However, Bruce immediately provided an alibi that was easy to verify. He was indeed hundreds of kilometers away from the city at that time, which could be confirmed through motel records. At the same time, Bruce's colleagues stated that he was working with another client during the massacre. Bruce has been removed from the suspect list. Despite his quarrelsome nature, Bruce had no idea that Barbara might have mortal enemies capable of murder, especially since they had been living together. Rachel was now missing. The police wanted to talk to their daughter. During the inspection of the family's home, no signs of a break-in were found. However, serious concerns arose that Rachel, who had disappeared from all radar, was in danger. Attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. She ignored calls from relatives and law enforcement. Also, no ransom demands received. According to the neighbors, the last activity in the apartment was noticed several days prior. They also learned about Rachel's relationship with her older boyfriend, Ian Allen. Additionally, Bruce mentioned the problems that arose between Barbara and the young couple, including an incident when she took Rachel from Ian's house and forbade Rachel from seeing him. It's possible that Ian and Rachel want revenge on Barbara for interfering in their love affair. The police went to Ian's house to talk to him and find out Rachel's whereabouts. Their suspicions were quickly confirmed. Ian was also missing. His parents said that they had last seen him a few days ago, and since then, they were unable to reach him. They were very worried and were about to go to the police station to file a report about their son's disappearance. The police granted them permission to look around his room. Law enforcement took Ian's laptop for forensic examination. Shortly before his disappearance, he was planning a route to Tampa, Florida. His car was missing from the family home, leading the authorities to declare it wanted and distribute descriptions of both Ian and Rachel. It seemed they was involved in the crime and was now on the run. Authorities began to track the activity of their bank cards, and less than a day later, they recorded a payment at a gas station in Louisiana. On September 15, 2006, one of the officers noticed Ian's car on the road. He was stopped and surrendered without resistance. Interestingly, as soon as the car was stopped, Rachel ran out, approached the officers, claiming she had been kidnapped and held against her will. Although her story appeared unconvincing, Ian was arrested and taken to the police station while Rachel was sent to the hospital. Doctors confirmed that she showed no signs of torture or even forced detention. It seems she was in the car voluntarily, without any coercion. Moreover, during subsequent interviews with law enforcement officers, discrepancies and contradictions were noted in her story. After a medical examination, Rachel was also arrested and taken to the station. She stated that on the night of September 13, 2006, she woke up to her mother's screams. Rachel jumped out of bed and ran to Barbara's bedroom, where she saw her boyfriend stabbing Barbara to death. As soon as he saw Rachel, he punched her in the face, causing her to fall and lose consciousness. She only regained her senses later in a hotel room where he had kidnapped her. He held Rachel there for several days before they began moving towards the state line to escape. Rachel insisted that she had been kidnapped, but the police quickly gathered evidence suggesting that she was lying. At the very least, there were no signs of a punch on her face as she had claimed. Additionally, her DNA samples were found on the latex gloves, the sponges, and even on the tape that was used to cover the box containing the body in Barbara's bedroom. This indicated that she at least assisted in the attempt to remove the evidence. The criminals had cleaned the knives, and there were no fingerprints on the handles, making it possible to reconstruct the course of events only from the statements of the killers. When reviewing the correspondence between Rachel and Ian, investigators discovered that Rachel had been spinning tales about her boyfriend for quite some time, including that her mother was going to kill her and that she faced daily threats. She simply feared for her life. Of particular importance were the girl's messages on the night of the murder, where she wrote to her boyfriend about another conflict with her mother, stating it was time for them to put an end to it. What exactly she meant remained a mystery. Rachel insisted that they had discussed escaping to another state, yet the context seemed more grim. Police reviewed CCTV footage from the gas station Rachel and Ian visited before their arrest. The recordings showed Rachel calmly walking next to her boyfriend, smiling. She was clearly not in captivity. Detectives decided to speak with Ian once more, and until that moment, he had denied any accusations. Finally, Ian confessed that a brutal crime had occurred. According to him, Barbara had threatened that she would press charges against him for the corruption of a minor, fearing that he would lose his job. He believed that Rachel's freedom was at stake, and an unstable, alcoholic woman could ruin his life, which he could not permit. Thus, the young lovers decided that the only way to solve the problem was to kill her. They planned the entire thing together, with Rachel watching for the perfect moment when her mother would be most vulnerable. Thanks to Rachel, he learned that Bruce was going on a business trip at night. He entered the house after Rachel left the door unlocked while her mother was asleep in the kitchen. He took several knives and then attacked Barbara. His first blow landed on her eye. He thought it would instantly kill her, but he was wrong. He could not pull the knife out of her eye socket. Instead of dying, she screamed loudly and began to resist. Out of fear, he kept striking her with another knife because he wanted her to be quiet as quickly as possible. He took the blame for the crime, claiming that Rachel was just watching, then helped to clean the room and dispose of the body. Ian's story sounded convincing but had one flaw: he reported only 2 knives, while police found 3. Investigators believe that Barbara's daughter also took an active part in the murder and used a 3rd knife. They then wrapped the body, along with the murder weapon, in a sheet, placed it in a large TV box, and removed it from the house, eventually throwing it in the water. Bruce's neighbor, Malini, confirmed that on that fateful night, he heard loud noises coming from the apartment. He saw 2 young people, a guy and a girl, carrying out a large box at night, which seemed strange, especially since he had heard women's screams just half an hour earlier. It became apparent that they were disposing of a body to attract less attention. After getting rid of Barbara's body, the young people returned. Rachel was cleaning up the blood in her mother's bedroom while her boyfriend was taking a mattress and several other items far from the crime scene to burn. During this time, Rachel was even writing a love message to Ian, clearly not upset by her mother's death. Investigators believed that Rachel actively participated in the crime because she behaved too calmly and did not even attempt to call for help. Instead, she encouraged her boyfriend to finish what he had started. This behavior contradicted her boyfriend's claim that Rachel was petrified with horror during the massacre. In June 2008, Rachel's trial began. By this time, her story had changed several times. Now, the criminal admitted that she had lied about the kidnapping and that she had gone with Ian voluntarily. At the trial, she adhered to a version more reminiscent of Ian's words, saying that she was scared and became an accomplice not of her own free will, but simply out of fear. However, this narrative seemed more like a return to the general legend from which she had initially deviated. Rachel continued to insist that she did not participate in the massacre, simply cleaned up the traces of the crime and helped get rid of the body by packing it in a box. The lawyer failed to convince the court of her innocence, and the jury found her guilty of murdering Barbara. Rachel was sentenced to 25 years in prison. 2 months after these events, the trial of Ian Allen began. When he learned how Rachel had shifted all the blame onto him and also fabricated a story about the kidnapping, he stopped covering for her in anger. He stated that she had been the mastermind of the crime from the very beginning. However, now it was too much. The prosecutor's office convincingly proved that he cold-bloodedly stabbed a defenseless woman in a fit of hatred. Ian was also found guilty and sentenced to a similar punishment of 25 years in prison, despite the guy's words. Even now, many support Rachel and consider her innocent. In particular, her brother and grandparents believe that she is a victim. On October 14, 2022, Rachel was released early from prison for good behavior. She went to live with her father in Newport Beach, California, where he still resides, while Ian Allen is still serving his sentence in a state prison. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Kathleen Volbeke. Australia's most notorious female serial killer was recently released after questions about her guilt emerged, but she still spent 2 decades in prison. Kathleen Volbeke was born in 1967 in Western Sydney. Her life was challenging from the start, as her mother chose to leave her violent husband, who had a criminal background. This man had a history that included a knife attack, though the victim survived. It remains unclear if Kathleen experienced domestic violence or abuse from her father, but her mother was murdered by him. After her mother left the abusive relationship, her husband tracked her down and stabbed her 24 times, resulting in her death. He received a 15-year prison sentence for this crime. At the time, young Kathleen was just 18 months old and had already lost both parents. Kathleen was raised by a family in Newcastle. She had an older sister, Leah. As a child, Kathleen discovered that her parents had actually adopted her, which left her deeply upset. At school, she had friends who understood her difficult situation and supported her as much as they could. However, her adoptive parents were strict and controlling, often punishing her, which created further problems for the 16-year-old. A staff member informed her that she was not legally adopted. She had only been taken out of state temporarily, meaning she was still in state care. Kathleen began to worry that her new parents were not going to finalize the adoption because they did not love her enough. She felt a lack of love and affection from them, especially when compared to the affection they had for their biological daughter. These feelings were further intensified by the hardships of her teenage years. Even her supportive friends had to deal with the negativity and depression she was experiencing during this time. As a result, Kathleen became curious about her biological parents to understand why they had abandoned her. She soon learned that her biological father had murdered her mother and was sentenced to a long prison term. This shocked her deeply. The situation was made worse by the fact that it was the 1980s, a time when people rarely sought help from psychologists or psychiatrists for personal issues. Instead of reaching out for support, the girl kept her feelings to herself and seldom talked about them, even with her closest friends. After finishing school, Kathleen chose to leave her foster home and move in with her friend Billy Joe, who lived with his mother. This change took place in 1985, marking the beginning of her adulthood. One night, she and Billy Joe went to a disco where she met Skryg Falbeck, a 24-year-old employee at a mining company. He was kind and caring, making Kathleen feel confident, calm, and protected. They enjoyed each other's company, loved to dance, and their relationship quickly grew deeper. That same year, they decided to move in together, and it seemed like their relationship was perfect. 2 years later, the couple married in a simple ceremony. A year later, Kathleen became pregnant. In 1989, they welcomed their first child, a healthy baby boy named Caleb. However, he had a small defect in his larynx that made it difficult for him to breathe when his mouth was closed, causing him to breathe heavily and loudly. Kathleen, who had grown up without parents, was determined to be a good mother. She cared for Caleb with love and care, especially given his condition, and she kept constant tabs on him. Sadly, her efforts were not enough. Just 19 days after his birth, Kathleen found Caleb dead in his crib. His death was a devastating blow to both parents. Doctors examined the child and determined he was a victim of sudden infant death syndrome. Affects infants under 1 year of age and can lead to sudden death without an identifiable cause. The investigation found no indications of foul play. Despite their heartbreak, the couple chose to try for another child. A year later, on June 3, 1990, they welcomed their son Patrick. For several months, he thrived and developed normally, with no signs of issues. However, on the night of October 18th, Kathleen heard a cry from the children's bedroom. Her husband rushed to the room and discovered Patrick in his crib, appearing blue. Kathleen was by the crib, screaming and crying in fear. The man administered CPR while Kathleen called for an ambulance, which arrived quickly. Thankfully, Patrick was still alive and was taken to the hospital for urgent care. There, doctors diagnosed him with epilepsy. Fortunately, Patrick was saved and later discharged. For a while, everything was calm, but in February 1991, another seizure occurred while Skryg, the child's father, was at work. His wife, Kathleen, called him in tears. She said the child had had another seizure and could not be saved. The grieving couple then decided to move away from Newcastle to start a new life elsewhere. They moved to the small town of Metland, a population of less than 2,000 people, about a 40-minute drive from their old home. Despite their past tragedies, they remained hopeful and continued trying for children, dreaming of a large family. Eventually, they welcomed their next daughter, Sarah. Sadly, she suffered from the same respiratory problems as their first child, Caleb. Her parents devoted themselves to her care and treatment, but despite their best efforts, Sarah was found dead in her bed on August 29, 1992, just 10 months after her birth. This loss was another devastating blow to them. Kathleen was deeply saddened by the misfortunes that had befallen her children. Frequent arguments between her and her husband had become a daily occurrence. Although they had decided to live separately, they had not yet filed for divorce. Kathleen repeatedly blamed herself for the deaths of her children, believing that she had failed to pay attention, missing important signs that could have helped them. She was devastated. At the time, there was no technology that could analyze the situation and identify any underlying problems. Doctors were baffled, declaring the children's deaths to be simply a series of tragic accidents. After a short separation, they got back together. They reunited and decided to move to a new home in Singleton, a town of about 5,000 people, not far from where they had lived. Their relationship improved, the challenges brought them closer together, and they became a stronger couple. They supported each other and continued to dream of having children. In late 1996, Kathleen became pregnant with their fourth child, 3 years after losing their daughter Sarah. Laura was born on August 7, 1997, and a year later the family celebrated her first birthday. The girl had no idea how significant this event was for her parents, especially given the sad history of sudden infant death syndrome affecting their previous children. The first year was especially difficult for them. They believed they could finally move past this challenging time. The arrival of their daughter helped improve their relationship. Kathleen and Skryg were able to enjoy being parents. After enduring a tough decade of marriage, they thought things were finally on track. Sadly, just 6 months after their daughter's first birthday, Kathleen discovered Laura unresponsive. She called for an ambulance, but the doctors could not save the baby. The medical examiner who performed an autopsy on Laura was unable to determine the cause of death. While investigating the circumstances of Laura's death, it was discovered that Kathleen's other children had also died as infants and all had the same diagnosis, asphyxia, related to heart problems. However, medical experts were unable to piece together all the relevant information due to the lack of available data. The Kathleen family's life would never be the same after these events. In 1999, an anonymous person reported the circumstances surrounding the family to the police, stating that all of Kathleen's children had died mysteriously. The police received information and started investigating the family. They spoke with Skryg Falbik to gather details and express suspicions about the mother, who was always present when the children died suddenly and without explanation. After this conversation, the husband became suspicious of his wife upon learning about the investigation. He gave the police her personal belongings, including her diaries, which the police began to examine closely. These documents later became crucial to the case. Tensions within the family grew, and the husband started blaming his wife for the children's deaths. The following year, the couple split up. The police, after thoroughly reviewing all the case materials, suspected that the biological mother may have harmed her children. The Kathleen had lost a total of 4 babies. However, these suspicions alone were not enough for an arrest. They needed solid evidence, which they worked diligently to gather. A year after her separation from her husband, Kathleen was arrested on suspicion of murdering her 4 children. She denied the charges, claiming that they had all died from natural causes, but police believed she was being untruthful. She was eventually found guilty of 3 counts of premeditated murder and 1 count of manslaughter. The jury trial began in 2003. The prosecution argued that Kathleen strangled all 4 of her children, claiming it was the result of anger or stress related to postnatal depression. They said she had difficulty caring for her newborns, overwhelmed by sleepless nights and the constant crying of her children. In this distressed state, the prosecution claimed she made the decision to harm her children, which allegedly happened 4 times. However, no specific evidence of abuse was presented. The children were raised in a loving family environment where they were well cared for, always neatly dressed, and well fed. The bodies showed no signs of injury, such as abrasions or bruises, nor were there any indications of a struggle or acts of cruelty. The prosecution highlighted that Kathleen consistently discovered her deceased children, which increased suspicion. Kathleen was the last person to see the children alive, which raised suspicions. The prosecution found this coincidence hard to believe. In response, the defense argued that the Kathleen was a housewife who spent all her time at home. In fact, she was the only person consistently with the children while her husband was at work. Therefore, it was natural for her to be the one to find them. The children died from sudden infant death syndrome, and this happened 4 times in a row. During the court proceedings, the Kathleen remained composed and showed little emotion. She made brief statements, explaining that she did her best to care for the children and often struggled to sleep at night. However, whenever she managed to fall asleep or became distracted, a tragedy occurred. Kathleen maintained that she could never have harmed her children. Her calm demeanor throughout the trial was portrayed by the media as indifferent and without guilt for her actions. Kathleen's diary entries significantly influenced the verdict, but only selected excerpts were presented in court, in which she wrote, "I was so frustrated with myself, angry and sad after losing my temper, and I felt like the worst mother in the world. I was afraid she would abandon me like Sarah," referring to her feelings about her daughter Laura. While these statements expressed her self-blame, they did not explicitly admit guilt or describe the events leading up to her death. Despite this, her diary entries were interpreted only negatively, suggesting that she felt responsible for her children's deaths, although she did not admit to killing them. These records were not reviewed by psychologists or other experts who could have provided a more accurate interpretation. The prosecution strategically influenced the jury by reading brief excerpts while neglecting to mention that these were personal records of a woman mourning the loss of 4 children. The media's negative portrayal and the prosecutor's diary entries fostered doubts about the defendant. Additionally, the prosecutor referred to Meadows' Law, which consists of 3 rules established by a renowned British pediatrician, Roy Meadow. He stated that the death of a single baby is a tragedy, 2 deaths raise suspicion, and 3 are considered murder unless proven otherwise. In this case, there were 4 deaths. Caleb, the first child, died in 1989. This was followed by Patrick, who passed away in 1991 at just 8 months old due to epileptic seizures. Sarah died at night in 1993 when she was 10 months old. Laura, the last of the children, lived the longest, dying in 1999 at 18 months. Initially, the Kathleen was considered a villain in the trial, with experts from various medical fields involved. They stated that sudden infant death syndrome can theoretically occur in one family, but the chances of this happening are very low. At that time, no one accepted responsibility for the tragic deaths. Were these events a coincidence in the Kathleen family? The numerous allegations contributed to the eventual guilty verdict. The case gained significant public attention and led to multiple trials across the country. where other mothers were also accused of causing their children's deaths due to sudden infant death syndrome. These women denied the allegations but were unable to prove their innocence, resulting in their arrest and facing intense scrutiny from prosecutors. Prosecutors even looked into Kathleen's past, which included a troubled childhood and a father in prison for killing his mother, which showed a penchant for violence. And the incriminating evidence against Kathleen came from her ex-husband, Skryg Falbik, who testified against her in court. She felt deeply betrayed by his testimony, as he believed at the time that she was responsible for the deaths of their children. In May 2003, after a 7-week trial, Catherine Volpig was convicted of 3 counts of murder and causing serious harm to her first son. When the verdict was read, she broke down in tears, overwhelmed with despair. Catherine believed she was innocent and did not expect to be found guilty. The media widely covered the case, portraying it as a triumph over one of Australia's most notorious female serial killers. Public sentiment towards Kathleen was extremely negative. She was widely hated. She received a 40-year prison sentence but could apply for parole after 30 years. Unsatisfied with her sentence, she appealed, leading to a review in 2005, which reduced her sentence to 30 years with early parole eligibility. After 25 years in prison, Kathleen faced hardship. She was treated with contempt and violence. Fortunately, Kathleen had friends who visited her regularly and believed she was innocent. Refusing to give up, she sought to overturn her conviction, filing an appeal and working with her attorneys from California, who brought in experts and new findings related to child mortality that could support her case. After 12 years in prison, in 2015, there was good reason to believe Kathleen was innocent. Several forensic experts reviewed the case documents and concluded that the children's deaths were due to natural causes. This new evidence prompted further investigations in 2018. Kathleen was ultimately left alone during the investigation. She spoke out to defend herself against the false accusations stemming from her diary entries. Kathleen explained that writing in her diary was her way of coping with life's challenges, and it provided her with relief. Doctors believed that the deaths of 4 babies in a couple suffering from phobias could be linked to a genetic mutation inherited from their parents. However, the scientific techniques available at that time were not reliable enough to confirm this, and mere words were insufficient. In 2020, an immunology professor from the Department of Genetic Medicine at the Australian National University joined the investigation. He initiated a global study into the situation faced by the defendant. Rare abnormalities related to genetic mutations were identified, leading to birth defects in Kathleen's children. Doctors confirmed that all 4 children in Kathleen's family had these rare mutations, which caused fatal seizures. The condition was determined to be a genetic abnormality, and there were no signs of violent death in these cases. In 2021, a group of prominent scientists from different areas of medicine, active in the 1990s, signed a petition in support of Kathleen, strongly asserting her innocence. They appealed to law enforcement, emphasizing Kathleen's innocence and referencing recent scientific discoveries and research that were unavailable at the time she was wrongly convicted. A new investigation was initiated by the end of 2022 and concluded in April 2023. Throughout this investigation, new evidence was gathered and submitted for review. During the same period, Kathleen's diaries were re-examined by experts in psychology and psychiatry. After reviewing the entries, they concluded that the diaries did not contain confessions. Instead, they reflected Kathleen's internal struggles, including her fears, anxiety, and grief related to post-traumatic stress. Forensic experts, who had investigated numerous infant murders, raised doubts about the possibility of strangling a child without leaving any evidence. As a result of these findings, the prosecutor's office was persuaded to reconsider the case's sentence and punishment. This new information sparked significant public outrage. Some people continued to believe in Kathleen's guilt and argued that she deserved to be in prison, while others were furious, questioning why an innocent woman had spent 20 years behind bars. On June 5, 2023, Kathleen Volbig was pardoned after serving 20 years of a prison sentence that was originally intended to last at least 25 years. This pardon allowed her to appeal to the Court of Appeal for criminal cases, which could provide her with financial compensation for the years she lost. However, she still faces the lasting effects of media coverage that has turned her case into a phenomenon known as Kathleen phobia, causing her to face hostility from strangers. Financial compensation cannot make up for the time she spent alone in prison, alongside dangerous criminals. Nor can it erase the humiliation and betrayal she experienced. Her life has truly been a nightmare. Kathleen is now 56 years old and continues to persevere despite everything. If her children had lived, her firstborn, Caleb, would be 34 years old, and her youngest daughter, Laura, would be 25. They might have had children of their own, allowing Kathleen to become a grandmother. Sadly, she has not had the chance to enjoy those joys in life. Currently, forensic medicine experts are debating the validity of the law of Meadows, arguing that it is fundamentally flawed. Many women have suffered as a result of this law and were acquitted later on. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Karen Newell. Sunday evening, February 20th, 1994, on a desolate rural road in Orange County, Florida, between Cocoa Beach and Orlando. A car was parked on the side of the road, and a woman was frantically waving her arms at passing vehicles. When a driver finally stopped, she pleaded for help. In the car's headlights, a man could be seen bleeding in the passenger seat. A woman named Karen Newell was trying to save her husband, John Newell, who had been shot multiple times but was still alive. Karen asked the driver for a phone and urgently called 911, screaming that her husband was dying. Within minutes, a deputy sheriff arrived, followed by police and paramedics, but it was too late for John. He needed a forensic expert, not medical assistance. He died before help could arrive, and all the doctors could do was confirm his death from multiple gunshot wounds. They immediately began communicating with Karen about the tragic situation. Karen recounted that they were attacked while returning home to Orlando after a day at the beach. On the way back, their car started having problems that she couldn't understand. Her husband asked her to pull over to the side of the road to check the issue. As Karen got out and opened the hood, a small sedan parked right next to them. Inside were three men who looked threatening. One detail she remembered was a sticker on the rear window that said "Bad Boy." The men got out of their car without noticing Karen, who was focused on the engine. She watched as one of them approached her husband's window and demanded his wallet. Her husband refused and tried to defend himself. During the struggle, one of the attackers pulled out a gun and shot him multiple times. Afterward, the men jumped back into their car and drove away. Fortunately, Karen was unharmed. She quickly ran to John, who was bleeding. She felt helpless and couldn't do anything to save him. Karen Newell was originally from Florida and had faced a difficult life filled with cruelty since childhood. Despite these challenges, she maintained a cheerful and energetic spirit, enjoying parties and socializing with her many friends throughout high school. As she blossomed into a beautiful young woman, heads turned wherever she went, but this did not lead to a happy family life. After graduating, she experienced several unsuccessful relationships and, by her 20th birthday, had been married twice, with both marriages ending in divorce. Nevertheless, she hopeful. That spring, she focused on advancing her career. Previously, she had held various accounting jobs and worked as a nurse in a private clinic. This charming brunette even entered beauty contests, hoping to launch a modeling career, but luck was not on her side in those pursuits. One evening, she walked into a bar in one of Orlando's suburbs. There, she found a friendly stranger sitting alone with a drink. He was John, a respected local mechanic who owned a car repair shop. Just before their meeting, John had gone through a difficult breakup with his first wife, a Navy nurse who had just returned home from a long business trip. She told him she was seeing someone else, which was why he went to the bar that night. When Karen saw him, she felt an immediate attraction. Confident and outgoing, she approached him, sat down next to him, and began chatting. She discovered that he was the owner of a popular auto repair shop, young, successful, and attractive. Their brief encounter quickly developed into a passionate night. John then fell in love with Karen, and she felt the same. Their relationship flourished rapidly, and just 2 months after their intense night together, they got married on May 22, 1993. The newlyweds appeared genuinely happy, surrounded by a wave of love and joy. Shortly after their wedding, Karen's modeling prospects improved, thanks to her husband's connections and her regular participation in beauty contests. She landed a well-paying television job, leading to a busy schedule that often kept her away for several days. Despite John's worries about losing Karen like he lost his first wife, she reassured him that she would never betray him. She reminded him that their sacrifices would eventually pay off, and together they dreamed of retiring in 5 years, free from work and worry. However, just a few months after their wedding, Karen discovered she was pregnant. The couple was thrilled. John's desire for a large family seemed within reach, and they continued to support each other through this exciting new chapter. A few days after Valentine's Day, they planned a weekend getaway to the beach in Florida to relax after a busy week. On February 20th, John and Karen packed their bags and drove to Cocoa Beach, located on the east side of Orlando. Known for its stunning views and excellent surfing, they spent the entire day enjoying the beach, having a barbecue, swimming, and before leaving, stopped by a surf shop to buy some gear. After that, they packed their belongings and headed home. Karen was driving because her husband had consumed some alcohol earlier and wanted to avoid losing his license. John sat in the front passenger seat. They passed through a toll booth and entered the state highway. At this time, her husband was adjusting the radio, which wasn't functioning properly. Suddenly, the car skidded slightly. Karen mentioned to her husband that the car felt odd, and she noticed a strong vibration in the steering wheel. They decided to pull over and investigate, but then the attack occurred. John was shot multiple times while sitting in the passenger seat of the car. The police conducted a detailed search for the attackers. Using Karen's testimony, they were able to create a detailed description of the car, noting one key detail, a sticker on the rear window. Karen later reported feeling unwell. She was pregnant, so emergency services rushed her to the hospital to ensure her and her baby's safety. 2.40 caliber shell casings were found near the car, indicating that the men were dangerous criminals. They were armed with at least one handgun. Surprisingly, they fled so quickly that they forgot to take the victim's wallet. Police alerted neighboring counties, notified all available patrols, and warned drivers of passing cars. Checkpoints were set up, with officers carefully monitoring vehicles. Initially, attention was focused on cars with bad boy stickers. However, no drivers reported seeing such a car, and it did not pass through the checkpoints. In the ambulance, Karen answered all the necessary questions about the incident. However, the health of the Karen and child was the main priority at that time. After being examined at the hospital, doctors confirmed that the Karen was in stable condition. She was able to speak with police officers later that same day. Karen provided a detailed account of the events. She explained that they were not alone on the beach. A friend from work, Peter, joined them shortly after they arrived at Cocoa Beach. The three of them spent most of the day together, and at the end of the day, they drove back to Orlando in two separate cars. Peter drove his own car while Karen followed him closely behind. After passing the toll booth, Peter drove ahead and quickly vanished from view. Soon after, Karen's car began to vibrate. Her husband insisted they stop immediately to check the car's condition. Karen got out of the driver's seat and opened the hood. Suddenly, she heard the screech of brakes as a stranger's car pulled up near theirs. Just seconds later, gunfire erupted. In that moment, Karen crouched down to hide under the open hood. She overheard the attackers, dressed in black and white, demanding her husband's wallet. Then, several loud shots rang out, and the criminals fled the scene. She noticed that the robbers didn't take the wallet, but she couldn't see their faces. The police arrived quickly and began investigating the scene, exploring various possibilities. Some unusual aspects caught their attention, raising doubts about Karen's statement. First, no one reported seeing a car marked Bad Boy. Second, it seemed odd that the robbers, who were after a wallet for money, would leave abruptly and forget their loot after committing murder. Third, they overlooked the woman and didn't check why the car's hood was open. Finally, it was odd that John, a mechanic, didn't check under the hood himself, while the one checking the car was Karen, who didn't know much about cars. The police did not charge Karen with fraud. Instead, they chose to gather more details about the case. The police quickly found some interesting information, specifically a report from 3 months earlier in Orlando. It turned out that an assault had occurred at Karen's home. According to the couple's previous statements, at around 9 p.m., Karen heard a noise in their backyard. She told her husband about it and asked him to check it out. When John went outside, he encountered 2 masked men. The neighbor quickly left the house when he heard the noise, and the porch light suddenly turned on, scaring the attackers, so they ran away. John returned home and told his wife what had happened, and she called the rescue service. John was not seriously injured, but he had a lot of bruises. John had no valuable information that could help catch the criminals, since he could not see their faces. After a brief and unsuccessful search, John's family's case was declared unsolved. John believed that he had interrupted the robbers, leading to their attack on his home. However, things now seemed more serious. He may have inadvertently made enemies, and they had come back to destroy him. This also explained why they did not take his wallet. Their goal was never to steal, but to kill him. The police started investigating all the people that John might have had conflicts with recently. John ran a successful business, raising the question of whether competitors could resort to extreme actions. Most of John's friends and acquaintances were unaware of any conflicts. John was known to be a kind and non-confrontational person, never speaking about any unpleasant situations that might cause resentment towards him. Everyone agreed that he was always willing to help others. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that John's kind nature may have contributed to the tragedy. Police discovered that shortly before the attack, a stranger had appeared in John's backyard. He was identified as Peter, a friend of Karen's who had recently gone on vacation with their family John. Peter's apartment had been broken into, forcing him to seek temporary housing. Karen convinced John to allow Peter to stay in her home for a while to support him during this difficult time. Peter is an attractive young man with blonde hair and blue eyes. After new discoveries in the investigation, there is growing suspicion that Karen has feelings for Peter, and that Peter is likely the father of the child. It is possible that the couple planned to eliminate John in order to benefit financially from their relationship. Peter, who had a close relationship with Karen, became a suspect in the murder investigation. He was brought to the police station for questioning. During the interview, Peter's account matched what Karen had said. He confirmed that he had gone to Cocoa Beach with Karen's family and spent time there with them, drinking beer and smoking marijuana. That evening, he drove away after passing through a checkpoint, not waiting for Karen's family because he was on his way home to Port St. Lucie. Overall, his story was consistent with Karen's account. He provided detailed information about his background to counter any claims about an affair with Karen. At that moment, it became clear that Karen had lied. She had claimed that Peter was an assistant producer at a TV channel where she worked, but that was false. In reality, Peter did not have a steady job. He had dropped out of school and occasionally did part-time work like mowing lawns. This allowed him to make enough money to get by, but he was not involved in any television work. Police learned from Peter's friends that Karen had been having an affair with Peter, which began a few months before he moved into John's house. During this time, Peter often bragged about his relationship with a married woman and often shared the story of how they met. It was later revealed that Karen had used business trips as an excuse to spend time with Peter. At the time, Karen was 29 and Peter was 18. While Karen kept the relationship a secret, she often visited him in the city, where they enjoyed days together and spent John's money. They met by chance while driving on the highway. The Karen caught his attention with her handcuff keychain hanging from her rearview mirror. When they stopped at a traffic light, he happily stuck his hands out the window as if they were handcuffed. To his surprise, she smiled back and they began flirting. After their first meeting, they spent the night together on the beach. His friends noticed that Peter was very fond of Karen. He even talked seriously about marrying her and was convinced that she might be pregnant with his child. The couple had a clear motive for killing John. However, at this stage of the investigation, there was no concrete evidence to confirm their involvement. The first step was to locate the murder weapon. A .22 caliber pistol was found at the crime scene. Police are looking for witnesses who may know about Peter and Karen's weapons. They interviewed one of the Karen's ex-husbands, who revealed that Peter was not Karen's only sexual partner. She often meets with her ex in various hotels. In November 1993, she approached him with an unusual request to borrow a .22 caliber pistol for self-defense, claiming she felt threatened after two strangers attacked John. He believed her and provided her with the weapon, which raised suspicions. It is necessary to locate the pistol and conduct ballistics testing to determine whether John was shot with this gun. When the police asked Karen's ex-husband about the weapon, he reported that she had not yet returned it. This raised the police's suspicions about Karen's involvement in her husband's death. As they investigated her background, they discovered that she was on probation at the time. In the 1980s, Karen had been convicted of credit card forgery and large-scale theft. Because of her probation status, she was not allowed to possess the weapon given to her by her ex-husband. Consequently, just 8 days after John's death, Karen was arrested for violating her probation, which meant she would remain in custody until the investigation was finished. Police quickly received crucial evidence just 2 days after the arrest. They interviewed Louis Aragon, Karen's half-brother. Louis had a criminal history. In the summer of 1993, Karen approached him with a proposition. Her husband had a $500,000 life insurance policy, and Karen wanted him to help eliminate John. In exchange, she promised him a large payout. However, despite the tempting offer, Louis refused to participate in the murder. In November, Peter and Karen planned to brutally beat John in their yard over a money dispute. Fortunately, a neighbor intervened in time and scared the attackers away, which angered Karen, who had begun to plan how to get rid of her troublesome husband. Key to the investigation was the testimony of her half-brother, Louis. He revealed that Karen had approached him just days after the first attack and tried to convince him to participate in a second murder, but he had refused. Peter, however, was willing to do anything for Karen. As Thanksgiving approached in 1993, Karen convinced her husband to allow Peter to live with them. The police needed to verify the truthfulness of their new witness. They started by reviewing the couple's insurance policies. They discovered that Karen had taken out a life insurance policy on her husband for $250,000, which was stored in his safe. Over time, she acquired several additional policies, totaling around $500,000, a significant sum at that time. It appeared that her greed led her to eliminate her husband in order to collect the insurance payouts. Karen was determined to receive the money. In the days following John's death, she contacted various insurance companies, and some had already issued her compensation by the time of the investigation. However, the largest payments were on hold, prompting Karen to visit multiple insurance companies to demand her money. Meanwhile, on March 28, 1994, Peter was arrested as well. Both were charged with John Newell's murder. The prosecutor's office alleges that from the beginning, Karen began her relationship with John with the intention of receiving his insurance money. After getting married, she quickly took out a $250,000 life insurance policy and continued to purchase smaller policies. However, she did not directly participate in any crimes. Instead, she manipulated Peter and convinced him that they would marry and have a child together, portraying her husband, John, as an obstacle to their future. After the murder, a pregnancy test was conducted and it was found that she was not pregnant. She had an IUD, preventing any possibility of pregnancy at the time. Karen was fully aware of this. It was clear that her claim of being pregnant was simply a manipulation tactic to control the men around her. Given her deceitful nature, the prosecutor's office was aiming for the death penalty. And Peter was also facing the death penalty. So it was easy to get a confession by offering a deal. The plea agreement included cross-examination, during which Peter quickly admitted to having an affair with Karen. He claimed that they had been intimate at every meeting. She had won his heart. Peter revealed that it was Karen who had suggested attacking John in his apartment. When that plan failed, Karen began planning a more elaborate crime. As soon as Peter got out of the car, he pointed a gun at John's head and fired 3 more bullets into John's chest. Peter then dumped the gun in a lake several miles from the crime scene. Divers were able to recover the gun, and ballistics tests confirmed that it was the same gun that had shot John Newell. Additionally, the gun's serial number matched the serial number registered to Karen's ex-husband. In exchange for this crucial information, Peter was offered a plea deal for second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder. During the preliminary hearing, it was clear that Karen's lawyers were determined to fight hard. They tried to blame Peter, arguing that he was the mastermind behind the crime, motivated by jealousy over. Karen was portrayed as an innocent victim caught in the love triangle. If Karen was not involved in planning the murder, then how did Peter get the gun that her ex-husband owned? She never gave a satisfactory explanation for this. In addition, Peter and Karen's ex-husband did not know each other. The ex-husband even confirmed that Karen asked him for a gun. On September 5, 1994, Peter was sentenced to a long prison term with the possibility of parole, and he was released in early January 2010. And Karen Newell was sentenced to life in prison. She complained that it was unfair that Peter, who pulled the trigger, received the lighter sentence than she. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Christy Johnson. Christy Johnson was born in 1981 in Santa Clara, California, USA. She lives with her parents, Teresa and Kirk Johnson. When she was a child, her family moved from California to Saugatuck, a small town in Michigan. Saugatuck is a quiet town with less than 1,000 residents. It seems like a safe place to build a happy future with an extremely low crime rate. The locals feel so safe that they don't even lock their doors. It's a tight-knit community where everyone knows each other. Christy has an older brother named Derek, who is just a few years older than her. Her parents later divorced, but they maintained a good relationship for the sake of their children. Christy and Derek took turns living with their father and mother as required by the custody agreement. As a result, Christy quickly took on household responsibilities. From the age of 12, she began helping her mother, including managing the family budget. Christy sought part-time work to gain independence and avoid having to ask her parents for money. Eventually, her brother Derek enlisted in the army and decided to pursue a career in the military. During this time, Christy was in high school. Christy is fun and interesting to talk to. She leads an active and healthy lifestyle. Christy enjoys sailing, surfing, and anything water-related. She also enjoys theater and is a member of a small acting club. In the winter, she works as a waitress at a local cafe. Her pleasant, polite, and sociable attitude attracts many customers. Christy grew increasingly eager to leave the small town of Saugatuck, as the peaceful environment there did not suit her. In 1999, she graduated from high school, finally having the freedom to begin forging her own path to success. After some reflection, Christy decided to begin her journey of exploring different cities, exploring different jobs. Initially, she moved in with her grandmother in the small resort town of Santa Maria. Population 100,000. Finding a job to support herself was important. She then worked as a systems administrator for an electric utility company and continued her education. Christy decided to enroll in the University of California, a 40-minute drive from her grandmother's home. Although she used her savings to buy a car, the daily commute proved difficult, so Christy looked for work closer to her studies. Christy got a part-time job with a film crew. Her experience working in a theater group helped her adjust to her new work environment. She was hired as an assistant on the set of a horror film, where she met people from Hollywood. She interacted with world-famous actors and directors and felt extremely happy. Christy was fascinated by the world of cinema. Inspired by this experience, she wanted to get more involved in the industry, so she enrolled in professional makeup courses taught by Hollywood makeup artists. After mastering these skills, she considered becoming a makeup artist on set and planned to move to Los Angeles. She eventually moved to Los Angeles, where many famous film studios were located. When she arrived in her new environment, she avoided parties and social gatherings. She had a boyfriend whom she met a few years ago. They kept in touch despite the distance, and later he moved in with her. They rented an apartment together in Los Angeles. Since 2002, they have been struggling financially. Although it was not easy, Christy persevered in finding a stable job. Christy still had not found a steady job, so most of her income came from her boyfriend. Then their relationship deteriorated. Christy confided in her mother that their arguments often ended with him physically abusing her. She felt trapped in a toxic relationship. Her mother began looking for a new place for Christy to live. Eventually, Christy left her boyfriend, moved into a small apartment, and continued her studies. Her father supported her financially, hoping that she would find her way. By November 2002, Christy had found a job at a cell phone company. Although the job did not match her career goals or salary expectations, her mother then found her a new home close to her workplace in Santa Monica, a town near Los Angeles, where Christy shared a living space with 2 other girls. During this time, she transferred to Santa Monica College. Christy's Hollywood dreams did not come true. Her relationship ended and she started over. Despite this, she remained determined and continued to pursue her dreams. On February 15, 2003, Christy was scheduled to attend a party. Before that, she went to a shopping mall and had a long phone conversation with her mother about her future plans. This turned out to be the last time the family heard from her. The next day, February 16th, Christy's mother tried to call her daughter. At first, she was not worried, thinking that Christy might be resting or working and unable to answer the phone. However, when she received no response, she became more worried. By 9 a.m. the next day, Christie's mother contacted her workplace, where Christie was known to be punctual and reliable. Christie's manager confirmed that she had not shown up for work. A coworker told her that Christie was supposed to be attending a party. Christie's mother searched her daughter's social media but found no useful information about the event. Although Christie shared many photos of her life, she had not posted anything about the party. The mother also reviewed Christie's bank account transactions and noticed that there had been no activity since Christie stopped communicating. Worried, she called all the hospitals, but Christie was not admitted to any of them. On February 17th, her mother reported Christie missing to the Santa Monica Police Department. Police investigated whether she had been involved in any traffic accidents but found no clues. Friends who lived with her reported that they had not heard anything unusual after she went missing. Police contacted her ex-boyfriend, Todd. They considered the possibility that he might have harmed her, but he denied seeing her. Neighbors said they saw Christie on Saturday, February 15th, on her way to a party, but they did not know who she was with or where the party was. The police had to get at least something connected with the Christie, so her car, a white oil Mint, was sought. While interviewing her mother, they learned more about her ex-boyfriend, Todd, and her new boyfriend, Lucas. However, Christie's mother had very little information about Lucas. She didn't even know his last name, which complicated the investigation. It had been 48 hours since Christie was reported missing, a critical time frame in which police feared she might not be alive. They began checking cell phone records and discovered that Christie's last outgoing call was made at 5:34 p.m. on February 15th. She had called the helpline at 411, which could indicate that she was in distress and seeking assistance with an address or phone number. The conversation lasted about 3 minutes, suggesting it was important to the investigation, but specific details could not be obtained because the calls were not recorded. After that call, Christie's phone battery died, with her last known location being near Ventura Boulevard. Police reached out to the media to assist in the investigation. News outlets quickly began to cover Christie's disappearance. Police searched Christie's apartment for clues and discovered a receipt from a lingerie store dated February 15th, the day she went missing. They also learned that Christie had been in contact with Todd, her ex, despite his violent tendencies. She last visited him on February 7th. Police discovered a key clue while reviewing Christie's emails. On February 13th, Christie sent a message to the event manager expressing her intention to purchase tickets. However, she was told that all the tickets were sold out and was placed on a special waiting list. This tactic is often used by event organizers to deceive customers and then sell tickets at a higher price. The police then found Christie's new boyfriend, Lucas, and interviewed him. He reported that he last saw Christie on February 14th, the day she went missing. They spent the evening watching a movie before saying goodbye. He passed a polygraph test, had a solid alibi, and did not raise any suspicions with the police. Next, police spoke with Christie's ex-boyfriend, Todd, who also had an alibi. He was confirmed by multiple witnesses to be out of town. Police focused in particular on the party Christie attended when she went missing. Police contacted the organizers of the event and were surprised to learn that Christie had never purchased a ticket and did not attend the party. This raised questions about where she might have gone instead. To reconstruct the timeline of that evening, police reviewed transactions made with Christie's bank card. This investigation revealed the stores she had visited that day. Police then searched for surveillance camera footage that might provide details or clues about her activities. The police then received a call from a woman named Susan Murphy, who reported seeing a suspicious person. She recounted her encounter with a man named Victor Lawrence Paleologos at a store, where Victor said he was a representative of a film company that was casting for a new James Bond film. Susan said he asked her to audition for the role of Bond's girlfriend, complimented her appearance, and tried to convince her to join. Feeling uncomfortable with him, she eventually turned down his offer. To ensure her safety, her husband, a former police officer, went to see Victor. He spoke to Victor to try to learn more about his intentions, but Victor fled without providing any useful information. Susan later investigated Victor further and discovered that he had lied, that he had absolutely nothing to do with the film. Victor likely fabricated this information to meet beautiful women, although his motives remain unclear. Although Susan is safe, Victor is still at large and could pose a danger, making it important to verify this information and locate him. They then decide to interview employees in the store. Police described Victor, who had a reputation for harassing attractive women, in these conversations. At one store, a clerk reported seeing a person matching the police description but was unable to provide any useful details. The search for Christie intensified. Police deployed dogs and volunteers to the area where she was last seen. Volunteers searched for Christie and her car. Although police had received multiple reports of sightings of a similar vehicle, those reports turned out to be false. On February 24th, police received a crucial tip. They located her car, a white Mazda Miata, in a parking lot near the shopping center where Christie had been shopping. A forensic scientist then arrived to conduct a thorough examination of the car, collecting fingerprints and other evidence found inside. A water bottle was found in the back seat, and Christie's cell phone was found in the front seat. The police encountered an unexpected revelation when they spoke with the parking attendant. He recalled an incident involving the car in question. The vehicle arrived at 17:45, but it was already reserved for another customer. A man exited the car, and when informed of the reservation, he reacted aggressively. He threw the car keys at the attendant and left without further explanation. Sadly, there were no surveillance cameras in the parking area, making it impossible to identify the driver. With no leads, the police returned to examining the Christie's purchases from that day and were taken aback. On the day she disappeared, Christie had bought a set of clothes that matched the description Susan had given when Victor asked her to prepare for the casting. He instructed Susan to buy the shortest black miniskirt possible, along with a white shirt, stockings, and shoes. All these items were purchased using Christie's bank card, leading the police to suspect that this was not merely a coincidence. This suggests that Christie may have fallen for a scammer, similar to what happened to Susan, although fortunately she was with her husband. Unfortunately, there was no news of Victor, and the police had no way to contact him. Police once again spoke to Christie's housemates. They recalled that Christie had indeed attended and tried out the role, although they could not recall the specifics. During the discussion, they noted that it was related to James Bond. They mentioned that Christie was very excited about the event, and she had gone to get ready in costume. Christie was worried about being late for the tryout the role, which was scheduled for 5:30 p.m. Police reviewed the camera footage several times to locate Victor, and unfortunately, the footage was of poor quality and they were unable to identify his facial features. However, with the help of witness statements, police were able to create a composite sketch of the prime suspect in Christie's disappearance. By February 26th, the sketch was complete. An experienced police officer familiar with the case identified the suspect as Victor Lawrence Paleologus, who had just been paroled on January 20, 2003, after serving a sentence for sexual assault. Victor often used tactics like promising casting calls or parties to lure his victims. This approach worked for him, especially near the Walk of Fame, where many young women who come to Los Angeles to dream of Hollywood make them easy targets for predators. Victor first received a suspended sentence for attacking a girl. In 1998, he attempted to rape Katie Devina, presenting himself as Brian, a film producer. He received a very short sentence for this crime. There are also indications that Victor had embezzled money from a company before. In addition, several other women came forward as victims of his attempted rapes, but the police reports did not result in any consequences for him due to lack of evidence. He once attacked his ex-girlfriend in her own home, although this was also an unsuccessful sexual assault. He stole money and jewelry from her apartment. This crime was largely overlooked, resulting in only a suspended sentence. He then seduced a girl named Heather, as he had done with others, and convinced her to dress in a way that pleased him. He then attempted to tie her up and rape her, but she escaped. Victor was sentenced to 2 years in prison and was paroled on January 20, 2003, just 3 weeks before Christie went missing. After his release, Victor quickly returned to his previous criminal activities. By the time police began searching for him, he had been arrested for stealing a BMW X5 in Beverly Hills and attempting to sell it using false documents. During a search of his wallet after his arrest, officers discovered a wallet containing several stolen IDs, credit cards, and other documents. The police showed Susan a photo of Victor. At the police station, Susan quickly recognized Victor in a lineup, despite his attempts to disguise himself by hunching over, changing the shape of his arms, and changing his hairstyle. Susan's husband, who had tried to stop the attacker, also confirmed Victor's identity. However, a security guard at the parking lot where Christie's car was found could not recognize Victor, as he had only seen him briefly in the darkness. Victor denied any involvement in Christie's disappearance and insisted on having a lawyer present before speaking to the police. Victor expressed concern that the authorities might be trying to frame him because he was on parole. Police kept collecting evidence against Victor, and a new witness soon came forward. A realtor had been working with Victor for several weeks and noticed his unusual behavior while looking for homes priced up to $700,000. They visited multiple properties each day, and during one visit, they experienced an incident involving lost documents and keys that suggested Victor might be involved in theft. After the realtor saw Victor's photo in a police report, they recognized him as a possible suspect. The realtor recalled Victor behaving nervously during their last meeting, which happened around the time Christie disappeared. Additionally, while viewing a house, Victor tested the soundproofing by shouting from the bathroom, raising police suspicions that he was scouting for a potential crime scene. The police investigated all the homes Victor had visited, paying special attention to one where Christie's phone last registered a signal. They searched for evidence or Christie's body but found nothing. However, when they searched Victor's apartment, they discovered unsettling photos of women in revealing clothing. After 12 days of investigation, Christie's family remained hopeful for her safe return, while Victor was uncooperative, denying any involvement but acknowledging that he had seen Christie before she disappeared. Victor was born in 1962 in Pennsylvania as the youngest of 5 brothers in a family. He attended college, earned a bachelor's degree, and then moved to Los Angeles for graduate studies. He was married from 1990 to 1993, during which time there were allegations that he attempted to poison his wife after she reported his business failures. Feeling aggrieved by the world, Victor turned to crime, and his obsession with attractive women led him to violence. On the night Christie went missing, Victor and his lawyer provided an alibi backed by witnesses, stating he was at a restaurant with a friend. Nevertheless, police believed he might have had enough time to abduct another victim despite his alibi. On March 1st, a new witness contacted the police, saying that he had seen Christie on February 15th. She was near his house, asking for directions to a mansion that looked like a castle. His wife overheard the conversation and gave Christie directions to the location. Christie later called the information desk, confirming that she was indeed looking for a house that looked like a castle, which also fit the type of house Victor was considering because of its soundproofing. While the police were following up on this lead, something else important happened. On March 3, 2003, for teenagers hiking in the Hollywood Hills discovered something unusual about 100 meters below them. At first, they thought it was a mannequin, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was a human body. Without cell phones, they rushed to report their discovery to a woman walking her dog on the road. The woman then went to where the teenagers pointed. She saw the victim's legs were tied and covered with a blue cloth. The woman was wearing a gray hoodie, her hands were tied behind her back, and there was a hair tie around her right wrist. She immediately called the police. Rescue workers and police quickly arrived at the scene and, after much effort, were able to remove the body from the Hollywood Hills. The medical examiner identified the body as that of Christy Johnson. Police notified Christy's parents of the tragic news, and they were devastated by the loss. Christy's body had extensive bruising and abrasions. The condition of the body was poor due to significant decomposition from exposure to heat for several days, along with a rainy day. Her face was particularly unrecognizable due to the severity of her injuries. Christy's ear was torn, and there were significant bruises on her head and neck. These injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma and strangulation, which were determined to be the cause of death. Police believed that Victor was responsible for the murder, but they needed to prove that he did not have an alibi for the time of Christy's murder. To do this, police spoke to his friend Joy, who mentioned having dinner with him that night. Upon questioning, Joy stated that they met much later than the time of Christy's death. Joy stated that Victor arrived late for their meeting, around midnight, even though they had planned to meet earlier. Victor had scratches on his face, which he attributed to minor injuries sustained while moving. The police have pieced together the events leading up to Christy's disappearance. The man, who frequently targeted victims at a shopping center, approached Christy, a young girl he found attractive. He claimed to be working in the film industry and invited her to audition for the role of James Bond's love interest, presenting himself convincingly. Flattering Christy, he insisted she was perfect for the part, playing on her ambitions and making it hard for her to refuse. He arranged to meet her at a property he was visiting with a realtor, claiming it was for the audition. Christy prepared for the meeting and wore the outfit he requested. When they met, she became the target of his attack. She tried to scratch his face to fight back. Victor overpowered her, raped her, and killed her to prevent her from reporting the crime. He first struck her on the head and then strangled her, believing she was dead before leaving her body in the Hollywood Hills. Tragically, the blunt force trauma and strangulation didn't lead to her death immediately. She lost consciousness, and he assumed she was dead. When he discarded her onto the rocks from a significant height, she sustained even more injuries. Finally, she regained consciousness and died slowly. On May 12, 2003, the district attorney charged Victor with kidnapping, rape, and first-degree murder. The defense was well prepared to fight for his freedom, as there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. The prosecution faced a challenging task, relying on compelling arguments from forensic experts. The defense challenged the estimated time of death, citing the presence of insects on the body. However, the similarities between this case and previous attacks attributed to the same criminal. Preparations for the trial took time, and Victor finally appeared in court in July 2006. The defense argued that the prosecutor's office had little to no direct evidence linking Victor to the victim, as there was no DNA, fingerprints, or surveillance camera footage. This lack of evidence was attributed to the fact that the body was discovered 2 weeks after the disappearance, by which time it had decomposed significantly, destroying any potential evidence. However, the prosecution gained the advantage of testifying about who had accused Victor of harassment. They portrayed him as a skilled manipulator. It was clear to everyone that the victor was responsible for Christy's death. To avoid the death penalty, he decided to negotiate with the prosecution and plead guilty to a lesser charge. The only remaining step was for Christie's family to accept this deal. By that point, the trial had been ongoing for 3 weeks with little progress, and its outcome was uncertain. After enduring so much pain, the victim's family was willing to compromise to ensure justice was served. However, on the day the verdict was announced, the victor submitted an 11-page request to the judge, asking to withdraw his guilty plea. Fortunately, it was too late for him to change his mind. Victor Lawrence Paleologos was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Amy Fisher. Amy Fisher was born on August 21, 1974, in New York, USA. She is the only child in her family. Amy has a rather shy and modest personality. Amy often feels lonely. Although her parents provided her with everything she wanted, because they worked long hours and had little time for her. Therefore, she formed a close relationship with her grandmother and aunt. Her father was strict and harsh, often punishing both his wife and daughter for any mistakes, which made Amy afraid of him. There were many arguments between her parents, and each time, Amy hoped they would lead to divorce. However, her father was a skillful manipulator who controlled her mother, making her too afraid to leave the marriage. At a young age, Amy suffered a traumatic experience when she was raped by a family friend when she was just 6 years old. She kept this abuse a secret. When she was 13, Amy was raped again, this time by a worker hired to fix her family's house. And once again, she chose not to speak about it. These experiences left her with deep psychological scars. Despite this trauma, Amy tried to lead a normal teenage life. She had a close group of friends and a beloved dog that she spent time with every day. During this time, she dreamed of going to college to become a fashion designer. In February 1991, after an argument over the phone with her mother about spending the night at a friend's house, Amy ran away from home. During the argument, her father took the phone and warned her that if she came home late, he would punish her. This caused Amy to not return home, and she spent several days sleeping at various friends' houses and at her aunt and grandmother's. She was afraid to return because of her father's threats. Meanwhile, her father reported her missing to the police, saying that she was unstable and uncontrollable. That same year, the girl discovered she was pregnant, which shocked both her and her boyfriend. Fortunately, her aunt helped her arrange an abortion without her parents finding out. In May, when she left the garage, she accidentally broke the side mirror of her car. She feared that her father would punish her for this incident. She had previously taken her car to a repair shop to fix a similar problem, where a skilled mechanic quickly fixed the car without her father noticing. This time, she returned to the shop alone and met a man named Joey Buttafuoco. This meeting was the fate of her life. Joey was married to Mary Jo, the oldest of 5 sisters from a Catholic family in a Long Island suburb. They met in 1971 while both were in high school and taking summer courses. Joey was charming and funny, but he had lost his mother when he was 11, which left him deeply affected during his teenage years. Mary provided him with support during this difficult time. Their relationship developed quickly, and they married in 1977, purchasing a house next to his family's auto repair shop. Mary's lifestyle changed dramatically when she became pregnant. Mary began to accept a more responsible adult life. And she noticed that Joey had not changed. While she was at home, Joey continued to go to parties as usual. Mary did not confront him about this, hoping that he would eventually change. However, this situation made her frustrated because of Joey's needs and desires. He became addicted to drugs, went to work early and came home late, sometimes disappearing for days. Each time he returned, he had a convincing excuse, because he was very good at lying. Mary endured this situation for a long time, rarely seeing her husband, and her patience was exhausted. She began to talk about divorce more often, but Joey always tried to ease her worries. And then she went on to get pregnant again. After giving birth to her daughter Jessica, she tried her best to maintain the appearance of an ideal family. Meanwhile, Joey continued his reckless behavior. This made Mary feel sad and made her see herself as a failure. As a result, she began to experience frequent panic attacks. Mary began seeing a therapist who helped her control her anxiety. However, this did not solve the problem of her uncontrollable husband. Faced with this reality, Mary had no choice but to take prescription medication, raise her child, and hope for a future where Joey would change. Mary gradually realized that they needed to move back to their old neighborhood on Long Island, as Joey's parties and friends were having a negative effect on him. She convinced Joey that they needed to move. The couple planned to buy a new house. Much to Mary's surprise, her husband quickly found a cash buyer for their current home, making it seem like a great opportunity. They could move immediately, and Mary expected to receive the money to buy a new house. However, on the day they were due to leave, Joey admitted to a serious problem. He revealed that he had mortgaged their property and given all the money to his drug dealer. It turned out that he was heavily in debt due to his drug use and had to mortgage the house just to pay off the debt. This news was quite distressing. A family with 2 children found themselves homeless and broke. Fortunately, Joey's father stepped in to help by giving them the money they needed for a down payment on a new home in Massapequa, a suburb of Long Island. However, he had his own motives. He believed Joey was incapable of managing a business and feared he would lose the auto repair shop. As a result, Joey received the money, but he also lost his claim to the family business and became just an employee in his father's shop. Despite this, Mary remained supportive and forgave her husband. She enrolled him in a rehabilitation program, which ultimately helped him. In the end, they were able to find happiness together. The Mary never expected that another woman would enter their lives. In May 1991, Amy Fisher returned to the auto repair shop to fix her car, just like she had done the previous year. She was worried about her father finding out because she didn't have any money, so she needed to come up with a story. Joey agreed to help her with this. They decided he would say she brought the car in for routine maintenance, and that while she was there, someone had hit her car at night and broken the mirror. The plan worked. Amy's father believed the story, and Amy felt grateful to Joey for helping her avoid trouble with her dad. From that point on, Amy frequently brought her car to the shop for minor repairs, which she pretended were her fault, just to see Joey more often. Amy was much younger than Joey, with an age gap of almost 20 years. However, she often flirted with Joey. On July 2nd, she went to the auto repair shop again to install a sound system. Because her father could not take her home after leaving the car there for several hours. Then Joey offered to drive Amy home himself, and she agreed. When they arrived at her house, he asked if she could show him around, and she agreed. They had sex for the first time at her parents' house. After that experience, the girl began to consider Joey her boyfriend. They met again that night. Even though she was only 16 and he was 35, they began their relationship. Amy and Joey's relationship continued over the next few years. Amy would frequently visit Joey's auto repair shop, and they would meet at a motel and at her house. Joey seemed to be taking advantage of Amy's weaknesses. He knew about her troubled relationship with her father and realized how vulnerable she was. He began buying her expensive gifts and taking her out to dinner and on his boat. Amy was very fond of Joey, and their age difference did not bother her. Amy finally turned 17 on August 21, 1991. A month after her birthday, she approached Joey for financial help. By that time, Joey had lost his management position at the shop and could not give her the money she needed. Joey then suggested that she could make money by selling her body, and she agreed to become a call girl. Over time, Amy met other men, but her relationship with Joey continued. Their relationship was unhealthy, and it was clear that it would not end well. Just before the tragic events, Joey pressured her to cut ties with her aunt, one of the few supportive family members. Amy agreed and ended up without any support from her family. Amy urged Joey to leave his wife. However, Joey refused. Despite his relationship with Amy, Joey still loved Mary deeply and had no intention of leaving family. This revelation came as a significant shock to Amy. At the time, she decided to end all contact with him, but she struggled with her feelings and ultimately chose to stay in his life. During this time, Joey frequently expressed that his marriage was deteriorating. He mentioned having deep feelings for Amy and even mentioned wanting Mary dead. According to him, he had caught Mary cheating on him multiple times, and he described her behavior as unbearable, saying that she had tormented him throughout their marriage. Joey often made excuses for why he couldn't file for divorce, with the couple's children being the main reason. Amy believed him and felt sympathy for his situation. Over time, these lies began to influence Amy's thoughts, leading her to devise a murder plan. She intended for Mary to be shot, believing this would allow Joey to be free of his wife. Initially, Amy attempted to hire two of her classmates to carry out the murder, offering them $400 in sexual favors in return. However, her classmates eventually refused, causing her plan to fail. The situation changed dramatically when Amy started going to the gym and met the gym owner, Paul Meckley, a 30-year-old man. They began a romantic relationship. In addition, Amy regularly met 3 clients, providing them with intimate services. At this point, she decided to stop using the company's services and started seeing clients directly. She openly shared details of her life with Paul. Since he knew Joey well, Paul tried to convince Amy to end her relationship with Joey, who was married. When Joey finds out that Amy is dating someone else, he becomes anxious for fear of losing her. He tries to interfere with her new relationship, but all his efforts are unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Paul and Amy decide to get revenge on Joey. Their plan is to inform his wife, Mary, about Joey's affair. To carry out their plan, they hire a 21-year-old named Peter Gorgenti to drive Amy to Mary's house. They steal the license plate from a random car in town to use on Peter's car. On May 19, 1992, Amy went to school but did not intend to attend classes. Instead, she went straight to the nurse, saying she felt unwell, and was sent home. Peter was waiting for her in his car at the entrance. They switched the license plates and drove to the Mary family's house. At 11:30, Amy knocked on the door. At that moment, Mary was inside the house drawing by herself. When Mary opened the door, Amy asked her to step out onto the porch for an important conversation. Amy introduced herself using a fake name and told a story about Joey being in a relationship with her sister. However, Mary did not believe her. She thought her husband had stopped partying and had become a devoted family man. The Amy guest became very anxious. She felt frustrated by Mary's lack of trust. To prove her connection, she revealed a T-shirt with the logo of the auto repair shop where Joey worked. However, Mary still did not believe and rejected Amy's story. This led to a heated argument that lasted 15 minutes. The Amy tried every possible way to persuade the Mary that her husband was having an affair. Amy concealed important details such as her actual age, where she lived, and her relationship with the Joey, twisting the truth to fit her story. As a result, Amy's lies seemed even less credible. Eventually, the Mary turned away and headed for the door, asking the Amy to leave. It was clear that she viewed the girl's claims as fabrications and had no intention of listening further. In a fit of rage, Amy hit Mary in the head and accidentally shot her. The recoil of the gun knocked Amy to the ground, and Mary landed on top of Amy. She then pushed Mary away, quickly got up, and got into Peter's car. She later told Peter that the gun had gone off accidentally, claiming that she had only meant to scare Mary. After fleeing the scene, they dumped the gun and Mary's bloody clothes in a sewer near her house. She returned home and pretended that nothing had happened. A passerby heard a loud bang but did not see Amy. He found Mary lying unconscious in a pool of blood on the porch. He quickly ran to a neighbor's house for help and called an ambulance. Doctors arrived in time and discovered that the bullet had hit a vital artery and shattered her jaw. Mary had lost a significant amount of blood and was in critical condition. Thanks to the passerby's quick actions, she had a chance of survival. Doctors assessed her condition and thought she had a good chance of recovery and rushed her to the hospital. The bullet was lodged near her spine, making it impossible to remove. Mary was placed on life support overnight while undergoing surgery. Fortunately, she regained consciousness a few days later and was able to provide the police with a description of her attacker. Mary repeated Amy's story, but Amy had given a false address and name, rendering the information futile. However, there was one clue: a T-shirt with the logo of Joey's auto repair shop. The police approached Joey for information. He explained that he had distributed a large number of the T-shirts for promotional purposes. He also gave the police a photo of Amy, his mistress. Joey suspected her of being involved, which helped the police identify the attacker. On May 21st, Amy was arrested on the street near her home. She was then subjected to a 12-hour interrogation without her parents or an attorney present, a violation of the legal protections afforded to minors. Her parents had no idea what had happened. When they returned home that evening, they assumed Amy had simply run away again, so they were not concerned when she did not return home that night. The police did not inform them that their daughter had been arrested for attempted murder. When details of the case became public, journalists quickly became interested in Amy, a girl with a troubled life and crime. They reported that she had sold her body and had attacked a respectable married woman with a gun. This caused public outrage and reporters searched for any information they could find. A video emerged showing Amy with another client. Weeks after her arrest, Amy had not confessed to any of the crimes. She was held on $2 million bail. Her story attracted a lot of attention. Amy to post bail and spend time at home while awaiting trial. However, the media attention severely harmed her reputation. Amy claimed that the illegal activities she was involved in were a result of Joey's influence, as he pressured her into selling her body at a young age. This became the central argument that her lawyers used in their defense strategy. Joey denied having an affair with Amy, but evidence emerged in the form of 13 receipts from a motel where he met Amy, confirming their secret involvement. Several motel employees confirmed frequent visits. During the court proceedings, Amy spoke against him, providing evidence linking his handwriting to the relationship. However, Joey maintained that the accusations were fabricated. Even Mary sided with him, refuting Amy's. While waiting for her trial, Amy focused on preparing for it. She spent all her money on bail, leaving her unable to pay her lawyer, who agreed to defend her for free. There were rumors that she was having an affair with her lawyer, who seemed to have feelings for her and even sent her gifts. On the advice of her attorney, she accepted a plea deal with the prosecution. With the weapon and motive, it would be difficult to argue that the gun went off accidentally. On September 23, 1992, after turning 18, she confessed to the accidental killing. Amy stated that she was angry with Mary because she refused to listen. When Mary turned away, Amy hit her in the head twice with the gun. After the second strike, the gun accidentally went off, injuring Mary. Amy maintained that she did not intend to kill Mary. It was an accident that she deeply regretted. Journalists discovered that Amy was involved in a romantic relationship with the gym's owner, Paul. He sought to capitalize on the situation by attracting media attention. Paul even installed a hidden camera in his gym to secretly film a personal conversation with Amy. Paul admitted he enjoyed the media attention and was eager to appear in news stories, as they paid well. With the money from this exposure, Paul planned to buy a Ferrari. Once Amy realized that even Paul was exploiting her, she attempted to take her own life again. Subsequently, she was required to undergo treatment in a psychiatric clinic, where she stayed for several months. On December 2nd, Amy appeared in court. Mary felt the plea deal was unfair because it allowed Amy to be released after only 2 years and 9 months, a punishment that seemed inadequate given the severity of the crime. Mary, who survived the attack, suffered partial facial paralysis and hearing loss in her right ear due to the bullet lodged in her spine. The injury left her in constant pain and with vision problems. Doctors warned that if the bullet had moved, she could have been completely paralyzed or even killed. When Amy was given the opportunity to speak, she apologized and blamed Joey for everything. She claimed that he knew about her plan to shoot his wife from the beginning and even encouraged her. Although Amy wants to bring Joey to justice, there is no evidence linking him to the crime. Amy later admitted that she intended to kill Mary. Several witnesses confirmed that Amy had mentioned wanting to kill Mary. The investigation found that the gun was functioning properly and could not have been fired randomly, given the trajectory and force of the bullet. In addition, it was suspected that Amy and her accomplice Peter had taken steps to prepare for this trip, such as changing the license plate and purchasing weapons. This suggested that they were planning a targeted attack. During the trial, Amy's hopes of serving only 2 years and 9 months in prison were dashed. Instead, she pleaded guilty to first-degree assault with aggravated circumstances and received a 15-year sentence. Peter Guagenti, who drove her to Mary's house, was arrested and charged with being an accessory to the crime and was sentenced to 6 months in prison. Joey appeared on several television shows with his wife to prove his innocence. They even went on a small press tour and appeared on various channels across the country. During this time, the prosecutor's office began to receive many calls from people who believed that Joey should also face legal consequences because they thought he was indirectly involved in the incident. The police could no longer ignore the accusations against Joey. The following April, Joey Buttafuoco was arrested and charged with sex with a minor. Joey reached a plea deal with the prosecutor and admitted his guilt. As a result, he served only 6 months in prison and paid a $5,000 fine. He claimed he had been wrongly convicted, portraying himself as the victim of a deceitful schoolgirl. After pleading guilty, he ended up serving only 4 months in prison before being released. In 1995, Joey was arrested again in Los Angeles for soliciting prostitution. He claimed he was innocent and that the incident was staged. As a result, he served the last 75 days of his sentence. During this time, Mary fell into a severe depression and took medication to cope with the pain. After the family moved to Los Angeles, she became an alcoholic but later went to rehab, which improved her life. Amy's time in prison was difficult. She complained that she was raped by prison guards multiple times. Amy wanted to be transferred to another facility, but the prison authorities refused. In 1999, after serving 7 years in prison, Amy was granted early parole. During a meeting with the parole board, she tearfully confessed that the attack on her lover's wife was entirely her idea. Realizing her wrongdoing led to her release. Meanwhile, Mary discovered that her husband had been cheating on her multiple times. Unable to bear her husband's constant infidelity, she filed for divorce in 2003 after 26 years of marriage. At the same time, Joey was arrested for attempted insurance fraud involving his car. He never learned from his mistakes. He remarried and continued to live an eccentric lifestyle. After the divorce, Mary had facial surgery that allowed her to smile normally and partially regain her hearing. During this time, her children were very supportive. In 2009, she published a book about her life story. For years, she harbored resentment toward Amy for shooting her. However, during her rehabilitation, Mary realized that it was time to let go of the past and stop punishing herself. This realization led her to forgive Amy. In 2010, Mary remarried and moved to California, where she became a grandmother and enjoyed a peaceful life. After her release from prison, Amy moved to Florida and wrote 2 books about her life. She sought fame and money, even creating a false identity. Amy began working as a webcam model and adult film actress, frequently appearing on talk shows to share her experiences. After marrying a former New York police officer and having 3 children, her marriage ended in divorce in 2015. Their eldest son stayed with his father, while Amy returned to Long Island with her 2 younger children and lived with her mother for a time. During this time, she worked as a stripper in a strip club but eventually quit. She continued to work as a webcam model. Her ex-husband did not support this lifestyle. He suggested that Amy buy a smaller house, preferably in a remote area where she could remain anonymous and find a regular job and live more modestly. However, she refused his offer. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Linda Cooney. On June 28, 2011, at approximately 8:30 a.m., Linda Cooney called the Las Vegas police. She was in a panic, reporting that her son Kevin had been shot in the neck and needed immediate help. When police and an ambulance arrived at their home, they found Kevin Cooney, 30, lying on the living room floor, bleeding. They quickly provided him with medical assistance. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they found several unusual details. Ammunition and weapons were scattered across the floor, which was not typical. They determined that the Kevin had been shot with Linda's pistol, but she could not identify who fired the weapon. There were no signs of forced entry into the house, and nothing appeared to be stolen, so they ruled out robbery as a motive. Linda was 63 years old at the time. She remained calm during the police interrogation. The interrogation lasted about an hour and was recorded. Linda insisted that she did not know who shot her son and denied any involvement, despite pressure from the police. When the police arrived, Kevin only had time to say that the shooting was an accident before he lost consciousness. He was rushed to the nearest medical center. Fortunately, Kevin survived, but his condition was serious and he would need a long time to recover. Linda's interrogation is ongoing. Police believe Kevin may have wanted to end his life. When Linda was questioned about this, she stated that he had tried to do so before. This situation required further investigation, and it was later revealed that there were more disturbing details involved in the case. During the investigation, it was discovered that a similar tragic shooting had occurred in the family 19 years earlier. Linda reported that Kevin had gone through a troubled adolescence, which had worsened after the death of his father. She informed the police that Kevin had repeatedly threatened to end his life. Even as an adult, Kevin continued to exhibit unstable behavior. Linda recounted an incident just hours before the shooting, at approximately 1 a.m. on June 28, 2011, when Kevin attacked her after an argument. He suddenly turned a corner and struck her in the chest, knocking her to the floor. She showed the police a large bruise as evidence of the attack, saying that Kevin had expressed a desire to kill her. After the fight, Linda went to bed. At the time, only Linda and Kevin were home, as her youngest son was away on a business trip. The conflict with Kevin began because of his relationship with a girl named Karina Taylor. Linda described Kevin as emotionally unstable and Karina as unpredictable, which led to frequent arguments. She said that these conflicts were common and that she was used to them. The next morning, Linda woke up and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. In the living room, she found Kevin lying on the floor with a gunshot wound. He was still alive. However, strangely, Linda said that she did not hear the gunshot. Experienced police sensed deception from the start. It appeared that Linda was trying to conceal what happened that night. She was careful with her words, while the Kevin was unconscious and there were no other witnesses for the police. So they decided to test the only piece of evidence, a .357 Magnum pistol used in the shooting. They knew the gun belonged to Linda. What is even more astonishing is that 10 years ago, Kevin's father, Jim, was shot with this gun in Palm Beach, Florida. Police investigated the case and learned that Linda had been acquitted of murdering her husband, after which Linda tried to reclaim the gun, claiming that she needed it for self-defense. She eventually succeeded in getting it back. The police try to find some similarities between Jim's and Kevin's cases that might support the idea that Linda tried to kill her son. They may even consider re-examining the first crime. Meanwhile, the police talked to family members. Jim's brother, Bob, believes that Linda intentionally shot both cases. He never trusted Linda, but there was nothing he could do to protect his family from harm. Bob was the eldest child in a wealthy and large family. As Jim grew up, he became a successful lawyer and made a good living. The family originally came from Palm Beach, while Linda was from the Midwest, where her parents owned a small family farm in Wisconsin. Jim and Linda met at a party, and after a brief encounter, he fell in love with her beautiful brunette. However, Bob is skeptical about Linda. He finds it strange that she works as a secretary at a law firm and is involved in questionable activities. The Jim was deeply in love with her, so he ignored his family's objections and married Linda in 1979. Together, they went on to have 2 sons. Linda had 2 children, Kevin, born in 1981, and Christopher, born later. However, their marriage was not a happy one. Linda accused her husband, Jim, of being abusive. Over time, their relationship deteriorated, leading Linda to report Jim to the police for assault. However, she was unable to produce any evidence or testimony to support her claims. There were no obvious signs of abuse, and many people found it hard to believe that someone as respected and decent as Jim could harm his wife. After facing accusations that damaged his reputation, Jim decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, the children continued to live with Linda in Jim's large house, while Jim had to pay child support. However, Linda was still unhappy and tried to get more money out of Jim. Meanwhile, Jim wanted to spend more time with the children, but if he did not pay her in advance, the children would not be home when he visited. According to Bob, each visit cost Jim $500, a large sum at the time. Jim became increasingly frustrated when he realized that Linda was taking advantage of the situation and blackmailing him. Jim, an attorney, chose to follow the law. On February 7, 1992, he visited his children, not with cash as he had done before, but by court order. The court ruled that Linda had to allow the children to communicate with their father. Unfortunately, during this visit, Linda shot him, resulting in his tragic death. Family members believe that she was angry that he refused to provide financial support because she had previously relied on her ex-husband while not working. In a fit of rage, she shot Jim and then called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they found Jim lying on his back in a pool of blood. He was holding a kitchen knife in his right hand, and he had died from multiple gunshot wounds. Linda shot her ex-husband at close range but claimed it was self-defense. She stated that Jim attacked her with a knife, leaving her no option but to shoot him. However, police were doubtful because Linda had no injuries at all. there wasn't a single scratch on her body. This led to questions about whether Jim had actually attacked her and what his motive might have been. In the end, Linda's account was not believed, and she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The key witness in the case was her son, Kevin Cooney, who witnessed the murder of his father. He was called in to testify. On that tragic day, younger brother, 8-year-old Christopher, was hiding in a closet and couldn't see the events unfold. Kevin, however, was in the bedroom with the door open to the kitchen, where his parents were arguing. He watched through. He looked through the crack in the door. Kevin remembered feeling terrified and anxious. He was frozen in place, unable to move, when he saw what had happened. Kevin reported that before the shooting started, he saw his father holding a shiny object, but he couldn't identify it clearly. He thought it looked like a knife, but it might have also been a key or something similar. After the shooting, when he left the room, he noticed his father no longer had anything in his hand. It was only after the shooting ended that a knife appeared in his father's hand. When the police arrived, they suspected Linda had staged a self-defense scenario by placing the knife in Jim's hand. Linda had a strong motive for this action because her husband's sons would inherit his money upon his death. Her children would benefit from Jim Cooney's life insurance policy, worth $1 million, which, along with his considerable estate, would be passed on to his children. However, the most compelling evidence the police uncovered was not Linda's call to the police, but her phone records. They discovered that before calling 911, she had contacted her lawyer first, possibly to seek legal advice. During the 911 conversation, Linda made several verbal errors, possibly due to confusion. She asked for backup and claimed that her ex-husband was trying to stab her, despite having previously said that she had shot him and that he appeared to be dead. The police were certain that Jim was dead before she called her lawyer, and she only contacted the police afterwards. It is also feared that, before her arrest, Linda had convinced Kevin that the knife had been in his father's possession the entire time. During the trial, Kevin testified that he saw an object in his father's hands. In 1993, 11-year-old Kevin took the stand as a witness. He spoke with a stutter due to fear and held a small toy. Although his testimony was somewhat confusing, it was convincing enough for the jury to quickly acquit Linda Cooney, leading to her release from the courtroom. Clearly, Kevin's testimony played a crucial role in her defense. Afterwards, she gave an interview to numerous media outlets, describing her ex-husband as a typical abuser. She maintained that she was not a murderer but acted in self-defense. To protect herself and her children, some people supported her. However, most Palm Beach residents who knew Linda's family did not believe her explanation. Because of Jim's calm and non-confrontational nature, the locals looked down on her and assumed she was the murderer. As a result, Linda could not stay there long due to the public backlash and the potential for conflict. After receiving financial support, she packed her children and moved to Las Vegas. She wanted to start a new life somewhere where no one would recognize her. 2 decades later, the heartbreaking incident occurred again. It involved the same .357 Magnum pistol that was used to shoot the family's father, Jim. Kevin Cooney is now recovering in the hospital. Initially, he was unconscious and partially paralyzed. He was unable to provide a clear account of the events of that tragic night. When Kevin woke up in the hospital 3 days later, his first words were, "No, Mom, I'm afraid of Mom." Mom shot on. He immediately told several nurses about this and seemed genuinely scared. It was clear he feared that his mother would come back to harm him again. His statements were serious, indicating that he was not joking. Kevin's girlfriend, Karina Taylor, was not surprised by his words. She said she lived in fear of his mother during their 2-year relationship. Their relationship began in 2009. Karina stated that Kevin had a constant fear of his mother, who reacted harshly whenever he had a girlfriend. Linda had previously frightened off all of Kevin's girlfriends, but Karina was determined and not intimidated by Kevin's mother's angry expressions. From their initial interactions, Karina developed a negative view of Linda, finding her to be erratic and aggressive. Linda bluntly tells Karina that Karina's family will never accept her and advises her to stay away from Kevin. And Linda ominously implies that she always carries a gun for self-defense. This makes Karina realize that it is best not to confront Linda, causing her to secretly meet Kevin out of fear for her safety. Kevin's previous girlfriends share similar concerns. 1. Clarita Candle believes Kevin's mother is a serious threat, as Linda has threatened her life. Kevin often finds himself caught in the middle, desperately trying to protect his relationships, which are constantly sabotaged by his mother's behavior. Kevin really wants a future with family and children. But at the age of 30, his mother disapproves of his wishes. One day, his ex-girlfriend Clarita receives an unexpected call from Linda, who has found out her phone number. Linda rudely begins to interrogate Clarita about her life, using vulgar language and accusing her of only being after Kevin's money. This confrontation escalates into a series of unpleasant encounters, where Linda openly insults and threatens Clarita. Although Kevin and Clarita's relationship is short-lived, Clarita constantly feels uncomfortable and believes that Linda is stalking her. Eventually, the stress becomes too much, and she decides to break up with Kevin to find peace. Linda's plan to keep Kevin away from the girls worked for a long time, but it didn't work with Karina Taylor. Kevin and Karina's relationship grew stronger, and he wanted to build a life with her. He decided to leave his mother and move in with Karina, sharing their plans on social media. When Linda found out, she started spreading rumors and even contacted Karina at her work. Kevin wanted to make things right with Linda, and Karina believed he tried to do so the night he was shot. Kevin could not stand his mother's control, so he announced that he was leaving. However, she refused to let him go and used a weapon. She went down from the second floor and shot him in the neck. Police determined that Linda used a .357 caliber gun, the same gun used in Jim's murder. Police discovered that, once again, Linda did not immediately call the police. She waited about 15 minutes before seeking help while Kevin was on the verge of death. Phone records show that she first called her second son, Christopher, who was not nearby. The investigation concluded that Linda was guilty of attempting to murder her son. She was arrested and charged with the crime. On April 8, 2014, Linda went on trial. It had been more than 20 years since she first killed her husband. This time, the trial was held in Las Vegas, where she was charged with attempting to murder Kevin. During the trial, his younger brother Christopher, influenced by his mother, believed that his brother was responsible for the situation. He described Kevin as a very cruel person, often violent at home and often arguing with his mother. During the call, Linda informed Christopher that Kevin had attacked her by hitting her and threatening to kill her. In response, she retrieved a loaded pistol that she kept in the living room for self-defense. She intended to use it to protect herself and stop Kevin, but he took the gun from her. While he was armed, Kevin accidentally shot himself. The defense attempted to present this as an accident, but this was inconsistent with Linda's initial statement, in which she claimed that she did not see who fired the shot, and Kevin also claimed that his mother shot him. During the trial, the prosecution presented testimony from 2 girls, one former girlfriend and one current girlfriend of Kevin, as well as 4 nurses who had contact with him during his hospital stay. All of them confirmed that Linda shot him. In addition to their statements, there was considerable physical evidence, including fingerprints found on the weapon. For months after the shooting that left Kevin paralyzed, he was able to testify in court, but he altered his original story. He now claimed that there had been an argument between them that night, insisting that he attacked Linda first. The Kevin did not hold Linda responsible for the incident, referring to it as self-defense or an accident. He had expressed similar sentiments when speaking to the police at the hospital. It seemed he was worried about not surviving, so he wanted to ensure his mother wouldn't go to prison after he passed away. Kevin loved his mother deeply and continued to protect her, but this did not alter the reality that there had been reports of arguments and domestic violence coming from their home for several years. Kevin's message, originally seen as a warning to his girlfriend about Linda. It was clear that Linda had total control over her children's relationships. She chose not only who they could date but also who their friends would be. She managed Kevin's mobile phone, preventing him from talking to girls, and did the same with Christopher. The Kevins and Christopher personal lives were completely controlled. They didn't even have doors on their rooms. Even though they were grown men, they still had to rely on their mother's permission for everything. Since childhood, Linda has said that they owe her their lives for the violent events of 20 years ago. They truly believed that their father intended to harm them, which made them completely submissive to Linda's authority. The trial was ongoing, and its outcome was uncertain. The prosecution argued that the Kevin was trying to escape his mother's oppressive control. When Linda realized she was losing control, she grabbed a gun and attempted to kill Kevin. They presented strong evidence, including a video of the Kevin in a hospital bed, where he claimed his mother shot him. However, Kevin refuted this claim, stating it stemmed from anger. While in court, Kevin appeared to take full responsibility for the incident. He admitted to threatening his mother, breaking down in tears and begging Linda for forgiveness. The prosecutor accused Linda of being completely controlling and manipulating her sons, but Kevin insisted that he was in charge and made his own decisions. He also admitted to using violence if his mother did not comply. However, this is hard to believe given the testimony of his former girlfriends, who reported that Linda did not allow her sons to pursue personal relationships and maintain tight control over their lives. Medical center staff supported the prosecution's account. They stated that Kevin was extremely agitated and appeared genuinely afraid that his mother was coming to kill him. All 4 nurses who examined him there reported that Kevin admitted that his mother had threatened and tried to kill him. Kevin was then called to testify again. The same events from Linda's first trial 20 years ago were repeated, raising suspicions that Kevin might be able to keep his mother out of jail again. However, this time, Kevin testified that the gun was pointed down when the shot was fired, contradicting his previous testimony to the prosecution. He later testified that the barrel was pointed up when he tried to take the gun away. Everyone noticed these inconsistencies in his testimony. Despite everything, Kevin still hoped that his mother would not go to jail. The prosecutor's office claimed that Kevin was biased because of his feelings for his mother, which they said affected his testimony. The jury returned a verdict in less than an hour. This time, the jury found Linda Cooney, 65, guilty of attempted murder. She was also convicted of assault with a deadly weapon, menacing, and stalking her son. At the final hearing where the verdict was announced, Bob, the brother of Jim, the first victim, spoke up. He stated that Linda had repeatedly harassed and threatened his family, ultimately taking away a loved one from them. He warned that if Linda was released from prison, those close to her would be in danger again. Kevin did not attend the sentencing but submitted a note stating that he took responsibility for these tragic events. In her defense, Linda stated that she had worked hard for years to provide for her children and meet their basic needs. However, she also believed that Kevin had inherited mental health issues from Jim, which contributed to his aggression that night. The court sentenced Linda Cooney to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 13 years. Jim's family was unhappy with the sentence, believing it was unfair. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Heather Rich. We all experience youthful adventures, a rebellious spirit, and the transition into adulthood. However, For some, adolescence can become perilous. In the remote southern region of Oklahoma, USA, lies a quiet town named Va-Orica. This small community has around 2,000 residents, where everyone knows one another, and life is calm and steady. In the fall of 1996, the Rich family lived in Oklahoma. Mom Gail, Dad Dwayne Rich, and their 4 children, 3 boys, and a girl named Heather. At the time, Heather was a sophomore in high school. She was an excellent student and cheerleader, known for her beauty and ability to attract attention. Heather was kind, but had a rebellious streak in her teenage years. On the evening of October 2, 1996, an argument broke out between Gail and Heather. They discussed a phone bill that cost the family $300, which upset Gail's mother, who disapproved of Heather's spending habits. Dwayne, the father, on the other hand, remained calm about the situation. Gail explained to Heather that due to the family's difficult financial situation, she could not afford to pay the large monthly bills. Dwayne, an electrician, had suffered severe burns from a transformer explosion and required extensive medical care and skin grafts. He was unable to work and support the family, forcing Gail to take on additional work to make ends meet. Every dollar was important, especially since Dwayne was about to undergo expensive surgery. Gail wanted Heather to learn the value of money and the importance of being self-sufficient, but Heather struggled with this, leading to a serious argument between them. After things calmed down, Heather went to bed. She stopped by the living room to say goodnight to her father, but walked past her mother in silence to express her resentment. The next morning, October 3, Gail woke everyone up for breakfast, as was their usual routine. However, Heather did not come down for breakfast. Gail believed that it was because Heather was angry due to the events of the previous night. Gail hoped that when Heather was hungry, she would come down to eat. But after a while, Heather still did not appear. Gail went up to check on her in her room. Gail was surprised to find the room empty. At that time, cell phones were not common, and Heather did not have a phone. Worried, her parents called one of Heather's friends, but no one knew where she was. This behavior was unusual for Heather. She had never run away before and didn't have any mental health issues. She always took care of her appearance and wouldn't leave the house for long without changing clothes or doing her makeup. With all her belongings still at home, worried Gail and Dwayne immediately went to the sheriff's department in Wow to report their daughter missing. Gail explains their argument from the previous day, when Gail expressed her frustration over the large phone bill, which was a significant burden on the family, and Heather appeared stubborn and determined not to admit her mistake. The sheriff tried to reassure the parents by comparing the situation to a typical teenage runaway, especially after an argument with her mother. However, this behavior was unusual for Heather, who usually tried to find a compromise even after a disagreement. The sheriff explained that most runaways returned home after a period of time. They suggested to the parents that Heather might have returned while they were at the sheriff's office. The police told Gail and Dwayne that Heather would need to be missing for at least a day before they could officially declare her missing. Since that time had not passed, the police could not accept their report. Frustrated and worried, Gail and Dwayne believed that something was wrong and that their daughter was in danger. They began searching all over town, starting with Heather's closest friends. One of these friends was Randy Wood, a 17-year-old boy who was the captain of the school's football team. He had dated Heather, but they had quickly broken up and agreed to remain friends. Importantly, he was one of the boys responsible for Heather's large phone bill. When asked about Heather's whereabouts, Randy said that he did not know where Heather was or what had happened to her. Gail then decided to contact another friend of Heather's, a 17-year-old high school student named Joshua Luke Bagwell, whom Heather had just started dating. When Gail called, Joshua's grandmother answered and said that he was resting after a party. She wanted to let him sleep and refused to wake him up to take the call. Joshua's grandmother said she was cleaning out the trailer in their yard where the school children had played the night before. When the mother asked about her daughter's disappearance, She said she didn't know. Relatives then searched the area for any sign of Heather. After a day of unsuccessful searching, her parents returned to the police station, and eventually the police joined the search effort. By October 10, a week after the search began, no useful information about Heather had been found. Given the amount of time that had passed, few people still held out hope of finding her alive. When searchers reached the area near the Texas border, a body was found floating face down, partially submerged in muddy water. Observers from a bridge noticed that the body was covered in mud, making it difficult to see in the murky water, as if someone had deliberately obscured it. When a diver finally recovered the body and brought it to shore, it was observed that the body had been severely mutilated with multiple gunshot wounds. A forensic examination was conducted. Experts later determined that the victim had been shot 9 times at close range. The condition of the body was horrific, with many serious cuts. During this time, there was only one missing person in the area, so Heather's parents were asked to identify the body. They only recognized their daughter through the ring on her finger, an engraved piece of jewelry that her mother had given her. Later, dental records confirmed that it was indeed Heather's body. The news of her death quickly became the talk of the town the next day. Within hours, the entire village knew about the case. Randy Wood also heard the shocking news that same day. It just so happened that Randy had been crowned king of several football seasons that day. It was expected that there would be a big celebration after the game. However, Randy was deeply affected by what had happened to his ex-girlfriend Heather. He then went to the bridge and stared at the spot where Heather's body was found for a long time. In fact, he knew more about the situation than he had shared with Heather's parents. The investigation quickly led the police to Randy and some of his friends. One of them is the son of wealthy parents. The second is the best football player in school and captain of the team. The third is an ambitious criminal from the streets. As soon as the police got involved in the case, they spoke to Heather's parents. By that time, Gail had contacted several of Heather's friends and acquaintances. Gail became suspicious of 2 young men: Heather's ex-boyfriend, 17-year-old Randy Wood, and her current boyfriend, Joshua Luke Bagwell, who slept after a party and did not answer Gail's phone calls. She believed they were hiding something. These high school students appeared to be reciting rehearsed answers, and when pressed with further questions, they struggled to answer. Their behavior was quite tense. Gail believes that Randy and Joshua have more information than they are admitting. While talking to Heather's classmates and friends, the police have gathered many clues that Joshua and Randy know important details. And they should assist the police in uncovering what happened on that tragic night when Heather left home after an argument with her mother. Heather's best friend told her that Heather was planning to attend a party that night to meet her boyfriend, Joshua. Even though her parents had forbidden her from leaving the house after dark, she decided to sneak out. After her parents fell asleep, she climbed out of the window around 11 p.m. At the party, she was supposed to meet Joshua and Randy. Joshua came from a wealthy family and always arrived in fancy cars and dressed better than his peers. Randy comes from a humble family, but his athletic talents make him as popular as his wealthy friend Joshua. Randy is an attractive young man who is admired for his ability to play football at a professional level. Randy has earned the position of captain of the team through his skills and is recognized as the best player in town. Randy and Joshua are close friends. They often spend weekends driving Joshua's car along country roads. They often hang out with girls and drink frequently and smoke occasionally. There were few places for teenagers to hang out in the city, so they found their own ways to have fun. Heather, along with a friend, experimented with drinking and hanging out with popular boys. The night before she disappeared, she left home to spend time with them. On September 27, 1996, just 5 days before Heather went missing, Heather and another cheerleader were found in the hallway of the stadium with marijuana and smoking paraphernalia. It was also revealed that Heather had been drinking alcohol. As a result, she was suspended from school for 3 days. and her parents learned about this from her teacher. They were upset, as they never expected their 16-year-old daughter to engage in such dangerous behavior. Heather explained that curiosity led her to try these substances. She promised her parents that she would stop. Her parents became increasingly concerned about why she had chosen this path, as she was an excellent student and athlete. Although her parents believed her promise to quit, they found it difficult to confirm whether she was telling the truth. Bad habits may have played a direct role in her death. Police focused on Joshua and Randy to uncover the events at the party before Heather disappeared. Randy said he and Joshua had been in a trailer behind Joshua's house, where they spent the evening playing and drinking. However, both insisted they had not seen Heather that night, which raised the police's suspicions. The two young men told their stories in identical, almost rehearsed ways, they showing little emotion. This behavior led police to suspect that the teens were not telling the truth. At this stage, the police lacked evidence linking Joshua and Randy to the crime. However, their unusual behavior raised suspicions of their involvement. As a result, both young men became prime suspects, prompting a closer look at their backgrounds, their connection to Heather, and the events of that night's party. The autopsy revealed new insights, particularly regarding the number of shots fired at Heather. Remarkably, even police handguns typically only held 8 rounds. This begs the question, why reload the gun to fire another shot when the person was clearly dead? The second notable detail was the type of ammunition used to kill Heather. The killer chose Winchester double-shot. These bullets were quite rare and could only be purchased from one store in the city. Police checked the store's receipts and discovered that just before the murder, only one person had purchased this type of ammunition. The seller identified the buyer as Joshua in photos provided by the police. He came into the store and bought a whole box of 20 bullets. The seller also mentioned that Joshua was with another person. This person was not Randy, but Joshua's close friend, Curtis Allen Gamble, who was known to the police. He had a history of legal trouble, including multiple arrests. Despite his young age, Curtis had spent much of his life in juvenile facilities. He had a troubled past, having been arrested for drunk driving and shooting at animals, and even passers-by. Curtis quickly became the prime suspect, as Joshua and Randy had no previous legal problems and were never considered aggressive or dangerous. On October 23, police went to Curtis's home in another city. Notably, just a short distance from his home was a bridge over the river where Heather's body was discovered. After police arrived and found Curtis was not home, they spoke with his grandmother. She shared information about her grandson and noted that Curtis was very familiar with the area of the neighboring city and frequently visited the bridge where Heather was found. She mentioned that she used to take him fishing at that location when he was a child. The next day, Curtis was arrested and taken to the Orica Sheriff's Office. The interrogation lasted over 8 hours, during which Curtis remained mostly silent but agreed to take a lie detector test. However, the most important information the police learned was that Curtis admitted to owning a Mossberg handgun. This type of handgun can use a special type of bullet. Police suspected that he may have owned the weapon used in the murder. Investigations revealed that Heather had been shot with this rare type of handgun. After they seized the weapon and conducted gun tests, experts confirmed that it was indeed the weapon used to kill Heather. When the police presented evidence linking Curtis to Heather's murder, the investigation took a significant break. Curtis broke down and told the police that his 2 friends, Randy and Joshua, were involved in the murder. Curtis then wrote a 1-page confession. The police were able to identify the killers. Randy and Joshua were then arrested and taken to the sheriff's department. There, the police presented Curtis's confession, in which Curtis was the one who wanted to kill Heather and that he initiated the attack. However, he was not the one who actually carried out the murder. According to Curtis, he gave Joshua his weapon and forced Joshua to shoot Heather. However, the police were skeptical of Curtis's confession, as Joshua did not fit the profile of a criminal. Joshua had no previous problems with the law, was known to be a model student, an excellent athlete, and was generally well-liked. The party took place in southern Oklahoma, while the murder took place in Texas. As a result, they had to appear in court in Texas, where the crime could result in the death penalty. After being pressured by the police, Randy finally spoke during a second interview. However, he denied any involvement in the murder, saying that Curtis committed the crime and that Joshua assisted him. Joshua, meanwhile, chose not to cooperate with the investigation. In October 1996, the police received two conflicting confessions. They decided to believe Randy's story, especially since he had passed a lie detector test. According to Randy, he had planned to go out drinking with his friends Curtis and Joshua that night. Randy later learned that Heather was supposed to be joining them. Heather knew Joshua and Randy, but had never met Curtis, so she had no idea he could be dangerous. That night, everyone drank a lot of alcohol, and Heather gradually lost consciousness. In her drunken state, Curtis harassed her and tried to attack her. Although she could barely speak, Curtis was afraid that when she woke up, she would remember what had happened. Knowing that rape was a serious crime that could result in a prison sentence, Curtis suggested that Heather be eliminated to avoid consequences. Randy thought he was joking, but he was serious. Curtis took a handgun from his car and aimed it at everyone present. Joshua and Randy understood the danger they were in, so they chose not to resist. They put the intoxicated Heather in the trunk of Joshua's car and drove towards Curtis's house. Before they arrived, Curtis led them across a bridge where Heather's body was later discovered. Curtis ordered the car to stop in the middle of the bridge and told them to pull Heather out of the trunk and place her near the railing. Fearing for their own safety, Joshua and Randy complied, but Heather was too intoxicated to stand. They left her on the ground. Curtis approached Heather and began shooting at close range. Randy saw a large hole appear in Heather's skull and instinctively covered his eyes, not wanting to see anymore. Curtis unloaded all his bullets on her. Curtis and Joshua then dumped her off the bridge and drove away. Randy said they were horrified by what they had just witnessed and the extent of the cruelty Curtis had inflicted on Heather. They decided to remain silent out of fear for their own lives. In October 1996, Randy Wood, Joshua Luke Bagwell, and Curtis Allen Gamble were charged with the kidnapping and murder of 16-year-old Heather. Of the three, Joshua was the most difficult to deal with because he would not confess, remained silent, and there was virtually no evidence against him. The prosecutor had to rely on the testimony of Randy and Curtis, but their testimony was inconsistent. To resolve this problem, the prosecutor offered Randy a deal. He had to testify against Joshua in exchange for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in 30 years. Randy quickly accepted the offer. On October 15, Curtis agreed to a plea deal that could have resulted in life imprisonment without parole. However, while in prison awaiting trial, Curtis assaulted a security guard, knocking him down and attempting to choke him before other guards intervened. Nearly a year and a half after Heather's death. In February 1998, Joshua's trial began. The defense made numerous attempts to justify the actions of those involved in the crime. The attorneys sought to discredit Heather by portraying her as an alcoholic and a womanizer, claiming that she had an inappropriate relationship with Curtis and that she had begun to threaten others. They argued that this behavior motivated Curtis to choose to eliminate her. Heather's parents defended their daughter, insisting that Heather was a talented athlete and a good person. She accidentally went with a bad group of friends and met a criminal. The floor was unexpectedly given to Curtis, he reiterating his claim that Joshua had nothing to do with the crime and had no knowledge of the planned murder. He claimed that Randy was the one who shot Heather. In a surprising turn of events, Randy refused to take the plea deal. He did not want his confession to be seen as an attempt to save himself and put others at risk. In court, he stated that he wanted to seek justice for Heather, despite his attorney advising him not to. Although this noble choice put him at risk of the death penalty, it left a strong impression on Heather's parents, who later met with Randy in person to discuss the situation. On February 14, Randy took the stand before the jury, sharing his account of the tragic events of that night, and the jury believed him completely. Randy described how Joshua had participated in Heather's murder along with Curtis, and also detailed Curtis's role in covering up the crime. That day, Curtis was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, resulting in a sentence of life in prison plus 99 years. On May 8, Heather's and Randy's parents met during a live broadcast. Despite their deep sorrow over their loss, they were struck by the honesty of the Randy and the genuine remorse he showed. On August 7, 1998, Randy Wood's trial ended, and he was found guilty of murdering the Heather, receiving a life sentence with the chance of parole after 40 years. Many people were upset by this verdict, as Randy was the only one who demonstrated remorse and risked his own safety to tell the truth. Many felt that he did not deserve such a severe punishment. Joshua was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was placed in the same correctional facility as Curtis. In January 2002, both men made a bold escape at night and evaded capture for 10 days while hiding in Texas, prompting a national alert. Eventually, they were caught and returned to prison. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Jorge Torres. Is there anything more horrific than a father murdering his own child? In the investigation and trial of crimes, mistakes in identifying the culprit can have dire consequences. One of the most heartbreaking situations is when an innocent person is wrongfully punished while the real culprit continues to be at large. This was on Mother's Day, when 8-year-old Laura Hobbs and her best friend, 9-year-old Crystal Tobias, decided to go for a short bike ride. They were expected to return within an hour, but vanished without a trace. Family members spent nearly the entire night looking for them. In the early morning, Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, found her bike while climbing the hill, but Laura was still missing. The search for she and her friend continued. A couple of hours later, a few hundred meters from the bike, Jerry discovers suspicious figures lying motionless on the ground in the dim light of early morning. He quickly realized something was wrong. When they reached the scene, he discovered the bodies of Laura and her best friend Crystal, who had multiple stab wounds. It was clear that their deaths were brutal and prolonged. Sadly, this tragedy happened close to their home. Both girls lived in the small town of Xene, Illinois, which has a population of 20,000. Their deaths deeply affected the local community, sparking a desire among residents to uncover the truth and the cruel criminal responsible. However, it's difficult to uncover the full story. The police came under intense public pressure. So, they worked hard to gather any information that could help them inform the community and capture the perpetrator. A few days after the tragedy, the commander of the task force at the Lake County Major Crimes Department confirmed that has a suspect. Detectives had already spoken with Jerry. They think he is involved in the case. He was brought in for questioning on the day the bodies were discovered. The police noted that Jerry had been acting strangely. A background check revealed that he had been released from a Texas prison just a month prior. Overall, he had a significant history of legal troubles. Although Jerry had repaired his relationship with his daughter, could he handle the situation involving her and her friend? The girls were discovered lying next to each other, having been raped. The scene was horrific. Both had suffered multiple stab wounds and had been beaten. A forensic expert identified a total of 31 cuts from a blade, primarily on the upper body, chest, and neck. The injuries were similar for both girls. Laura had defensive wounds, suggesting she fought back in desperation. There was reason to believe that the killer intentionally caused maximum pain to his victims. targeting areas that would prolong suffering rather than lead to immediate death. Jerry firmly denied any wrongdoing. Consequently, he was questioned for hours by law enforcement officers who sought to piece together the events leading to the deaths of the two victims. After a lengthy interrogation, the detectives managed to obtain a confession, which was captured on video. Jerry said he and his wife Sheila returned home on Sunday around 3 o'clock. At that time, their 4 children were flying kites by the lake. Their daughter Laura asked her parents if she could go for a bike ride with a friend, mentioning that it was Mother's Day and she wanted to celebrate it with a festive ride. Even though Laura was still under house arrest for taking $40 from Jerry, Sheila chose to let her go. Jerry disagreed with Sheila, believing that Laura should complete her punishment to understand her mistake. However, Sheila convinced him, and Jerry decided not to interfere, he wanting to ensure that both Laura and Sheila had a nice Mother's Day. Laura was allowed to go for a walk and was expected to return in an hour. However, she did not come back on time. Initially, her parents thought she and her friends had lost track of time while enjoying themselves and would return soon. But as evening approached and Laura still hadn't arrived home, their concern grew. The path through the park was short, and it usually took about 20 minutes to walk. Given that she had been gone for several hours, her absence became increasingly worrying. Jerry decided to investigate. He planned to search for his daughter along the path and intended to discipline her for disobeying, so he set off down a dirt road. Jerry encountered Laura and Crystal, who were playing and ignoring their parents' requests. Upset, Jerry insisted it was time for his daughter to go home and said he would punish her. He wanted to take Laura home and told Crystal to go back as well since her parents were waiting for her. However, neither girl was willing to leave on their own. Jerry then turned to Laura and said they were leaving because she was too caught up in her play. Laura reacted by getting upset, and Jerry grabbed her hand. She resisted and screamed to be let go. Crystal also pleaded with him to release her friend and leave them alone. Both girls started to be disrespectful and rude to Jerry. When Jerry refused to let go of Laura's hand, Crystal pulled out a small switchblade and insisted that he release her. In a moment of confusion, Laura bit her father's hand, which made him angry. He struck her in the face, causing her to fall to the ground. Crystal then lunged at him, but he easily took the knife away from her. Once he had control, he hit Crystal in the face, and she also fell. Furious, Crystal stood up and attacked Jerry, but he responded by stabbing her in the chest several times. Afterward, he approached Laura, who was desperately trying to defend herself, but she was no match for him. He struck her in the face again, and then stabbed her multiple times with the knife. Jerry's statements were collected after 24 hours of interrogation. The police believed they had caught the real criminal. He detailed the brutal aspects of the attack, information only the perpetrator would know. Despite his confession, it was hard to accept that a father could harm his own daughter and her friend so viciously. The detectives were particularly suspicious due to Jerry's criminal history. Born in 1970, Jerry Hobbs dropped out of school after 8th grade. He was known for his hot temper, which often led him into trouble. His criminal career began soon after school, with significant offenses occurring in 1990, when he first served several months in a Texas state prison. After that point, he was released but then re-imprisoned, typically for petty offenses. The list of criminal activities included possession of illegal substances and multiple assaults on individuals for theft. There were serious underlying issues that contributed to these crimes. In August 2001, Jerry attacked his wife while they were living in a trailer. The situation escalated into physical violence. 3 neighbors attempted to intervene, but Jerry, in a fit of rage, grabbed a chainsaw and chased them around the trailer park. He only stopped when one of the men struck him in the back with a shovel, causing him to fall and become incapacitated. By that time, the police had been called, and they arrived shortly after to take control of the situation. In December 2002, he was convicted and received a suspended sentence. However, he failed to report to his probation officer, leading to the revocation of his probation. In October 2003, he was sent to prison, where he served 18 months. He was finally released in April 2005. After his release, he took a bus to Zane. He visited Sheila's parents' house, where he reunited with Sheila and their 4 children. Laura and her 2 brothers were from Jerry's relationship with Sheila, while her eldest child was from her previous marriage. Jerry put aside past grievances and hoped to rebuild their relationship and live together as a family again. Jerry spent a lot of time reflecting over the past year and a half, dreaming of starting a new life. Despite the challenges in their relationship, Sheila genuinely loved Jerry, and they decided to give their relationship another chance. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Just a month after they reunited, a tragic incident occurred. One day began positively, with children riding bicycles and roller skates along the forest path. Many families were having barbecues, making the area lively and seemingly safe. There had never been any incidents in the past, and parents often allowed their children to explore on their own. It was puzzling that no one seemed to have heard anything. There were no witnesses to the double murder. After Jerry confessed, the police arrested him, and he was held in custody without bail for over 2 years while the prosecution prepared for trial. During the investigation, several strange inconsistencies came to light. Investigative agency found it hard to believe that the 8- and 9-year-old girls had a knife and attacked him, prompting him to fight back and ultimately kill them in a moment of anger. Additionally, it was odd that the girls refused to go home after their father found them walking alone in the dark. Were the schoolgirls really not afraid to be outside at that hour? All of this seemed absurd. In his confession, Jerry did not mention anything about rape, even though the girls had experienced sexual violence at the crime scene. Forensic evidence later uncovered more details about the terrible events that occurred that day. Scientists found male DNA samples, but these did not match Jerry. Instead, they belonged to an unidentified man. Despite this evidence, investigators proposed their own explanation. However, they did not explain how male DNA could be found on the girls, making their reasoning seem even more questionable. The charges indicate that it was a serious case. They had Jerry's confession and his criminal background, so winning in court seemed like a formality. Details about the DNA evidence were not revealed. The video recordings of the interrogations were sufficient to persuade the jury. As a result, Laura's father was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2009, a significant change occurred in Arlington, Virginia. Amanda Snell, a 20-year-old servicewoman, lived there. On July 13, 2009, she failed to report for her shift at Fort Myer, raising concerns among her supervisors. Amanda was typically responsible and committed to her career, so not showing up for duty without notice was out of character for her. To check on her well-being, management sent several colleagues to her dormitory. They knocked on her door, rang the doorbell, and attempted to reach her by phone, but received no response. When they found her door unlocked, they entered the room. The first alarming sign was that her wallet and ID were untouched. The military quickly discovered blood and signs of a robbery in the bedroom. Amanda's body was found in the closet. She had been severely beaten, and a cord from a household appliance was still tied around her neck, with a pillowcase over her head. Investigators determined that she had died about 2 days before her body was discovered. Numerous pieces of evidence were collected from the crime scene, including a sample of the pillowcase. The police noted that her laptop, phone, and bed sheets were missing, and they found several footprints in the room, suggesting that another person had been present. Since the base was secured against outsiders, this indicated that the perpetrator likely lived or worked there. Forensic experts identified the shoe prints as Nike Air Force One, which were very popular on the base at the time, providing no leads for the police in their search for the suspect. Months went by. On February 27, 2010, another attack occurred just 5 kilometers from Amanda's workplace in Arlington. In the early hours of the morning, 2 female postgraduate students were returning from dinner when a man confronted them at the entrance of their building. He threatened them with a weapon, forced them inside, and followed them with his gun drawn. He bound their hands with electrical cords and ordered one of them to get into his car. He then drove her to a remote area outside the city, where he raped her. The attacker strangled her until she lost consciousness and left her to die in a wooded area covered in snow, not considering that she might survive the assault. The girl regained her senses and made her way to the nearest road, where a motorist found her and offered help. He stopped and called emergency services. The student, suffering from hypothermia, was taken to the hospital. Meanwhile, her friend had also contacted the authorities. Fortunately, they did not find any immediate danger. After being discharged, she spoke with the police and provided valuable information to the investigators. The most significant breakthrough was her detailed description of the attacker and his car. She described him as a short, smooth-skinned Hispanic man who drove a silver car. Detectives quickly recognized that the handwriting matched that of the criminal who attacked Amanda. Additionally, the police had obtained DNA from the person who attempted to take the girl's life. That her miraculous rescue would set off a series of events that would significantly impact many lives. Later that evening, officers collected a DNA sample from Amanda's. In the car described by the girl, they discovered the university ID of the kidnapped girl along with her earring, which helped establish a connection between the main suspect and the attack. The main suspect has since been taken into custody while awaiting trial. Several months went by as the police worked to understand the details of these disturbing events. Eventually, the DNA sample was analyzed and matched with the National Criminal Database. Law enforcement officials were taken aback by an unexpected discovery. The DNA found on the bodies of Laura and Crystal, who were murdered in 2005 in Zane, matched that of this suspect. At the time of the girls' murders, the suspect, Jorge Torres, was just 16 years old and lived in Zane. The police were further shocked to find out that he was a friend of Crystal's older brother. This investigation into the brutal attack revealed a shocking miscarriage of justice. Jerry, the father of Laura, was wrongfully imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. After spending many years in prison, Jerry began to show significant changes in his behavior. 2 weeks after DNA evidence linked Jorge to the crime, police identified the true killer of the 2 schoolgirls. The charges against Jerry were dropped, and he was released from prison in early August 2010. After the murders of the schoolgirls, Jorge was not apprehended and graduated from high school in 2006. Just a few months later, he enlisted in the Marines. The investigation revealed then he had boasted about being part of the Marines, an important unit of the U.S. Armed Forces. But this did not help his criminal image. He remained a ruthless monster and continued his violent actions. Now, it was necessary to examine his potential involvement in other attacks. When in prison, Jorge was still scheming and manipulating events. But the manipulative tactics Jorge used could no longer be hidden. Alongside the DNA testing, additional evidence was necessary to prove his involvement in the murder of the schoolgirls. To gather this evidence, authorities decided to recruit informants from among the prisoners in exchange for reduced sentences. A suitable informant was chosen. He was a former restaurant owner convicted of financial crimes and had no prior violent crime record. He willingly agreed to cooperate with the police. During a week in August 2010, he was approached to communicate with Jorge. This person said, in his confession, Jorge stated that he entered Amanda's apartment in the early morning with the intention of robbing and assaulting her. When Amanda woke up and saw him, he took advantage of her shock, tying her hands with a wire and wrapping a cord around her neck because he feared she would recognize him and report him to the police. Jorge claimed that she had no time to fight back. He coldly detailed how he assaulted Amanda while she was suffering, and then concealed her body in a closet to delay its discovery. The informant reported that Jorge spoke about his actions with a sense of pride, almost bragging, make law enforcement officers were shocked. Jorge's behavior indicated possible psychopathic traits, as individuals with such disorders often seek admiration. Following this confession, the police chose to reopen Amanda's case. They discovered that Jorge was a colleague of Amanda and lived directly across the hall from her. In his room, officers found a gun and a computer containing numerous graphic videos of the rape and torture of women. Additionally, Jorge was wearing Nike Air Force One sneakers that matched the shoe prints at the scene of Amanda's murder. Forensic scientists started re-examining samples from the pillowcase found on Amanda's head and from the bedsheet. DNA testing eventually revealed a match, adding one more victim to the list of crimes linked to this dangerous criminal. Although detectives believed he might be involved in other similar offenses, they found no evidence to support this. The police were left with a serious threat to society who had been free for years. It was finally time to pursue justice. The trial of the case in which the graduate student victim survived the attack began in December 2010. The defendant was found guilty of several charges, including kidnapping, rape, and attempted first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life in prison. This was just the beginning of multiple trials. The trial for the murder of Amanda Snell began in 2014, after prosecutors presented Jorge's recorded confession and DNA evidence. The jury unanimously supported the prosecution. In late May of that year, the judge sentenced Jorge to death. In mid-November, he was extradited to Lake County, Illinois, to face trial for the murders of Laura and Crystal. Although the attacker had already been sentenced to death, the state attorney believed it was essential to conduct hearings to honor the victims and their families. The trial started in mid-September 2018. Jorge opted for a plea deal, giving up his right to a trial and admitting to the intentional murders of 2 schoolgirls. He received a 50-year prison sentence for each murder, but his life sentence was already revoked. He returned to a Virginia prison to await the death penalty while his appeals were under review. The death penalty was abolished in the state in 2021, so Jorge is now serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. One key question remains: why would the biological father of one of the murdered schoolgirls take the blame for this terrible crime? In 2005, Jerry briefly explained his reasoning to his mother, stating that he had been broken by the police during interrogation. Later, after his release, he shared more details with journalists. He revealed that he had not slept for over a day and was actively searching for his daughter with Crystal's father when he learned of her death. Overwhelmed by shock, he was confused and in pain, and the police exploited this vulnerability during the lengthy interrogation to extract his shocking confession. Human rights activists claimed that Jerry faced constant pressure from law enforcement, who used various tactics to force him into a confession. As a result of their actions, Jerry lost 5 years of his life in prison. After these events, the man decided to seek compensation for moral damages because he now knows that the police deliberately ignored the most valuable evidence that confirmed his innocence and locked him up instead of looking for the real killer. DNA samples obtained after the rape clearly showed that Jerry was not involved in the crime, yet law enforcement chose not to pursue the real culprit and continued to charge him. Now, it took multiple crimes being committed for the truth to finally come to light and for an innocent man to be set free. During the recent press conference regarding this incident, the state attorney addressed the media. He made efforts to downplay the situation and stressed that no one obstructed the detainees' access to legal counsel. He claimed that the detainees' rights were fully respected during questioning. According to him, Jerry's own behavior raised suspicions, and his past criminal record further damaged his credibility, leading the police to suspect his involvement in the girls' deaths. Detectives believed he had knowledge relevant to the case and continued to press him for answers, but Jerry maintained that this was merely an unfortunate coincidence. A few hours into the interrogation, the police took away Jerry's clothes, claiming they needed to analyze them. Instead, they gave him a thin suit that left him cold. They repeatedly showed him disturbing photographs from the murder scene and intimidated him with threats. Although Jerry consistently refused to confess, the police began threatening to arrest Sheila, suggesting that their children would be left without parents. He couldn't let that happen. To obtain a confession that could be used in court, they needed to record it on video. There was supposed to be no coercion or aggression from the officers, but many takes were necessary because Jerry initially refused to read the confession prepared by the investigator. Ultimately, the threats led him to comply with the detectives' demands. In February 2014, the civil lawsuit of a wrongfully convicted man was resolved, resulting in an award of over $6 million. However, he does not view this as a true victory. He emphasizes the importance of the wrongful conviction, which led to reforms in Lake County's law enforcement system. He notes that while he was imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, the actual killer continued to rape and murder other victims. Fortunately, that killer is now in prison and can no longer harm anyone. Police believe he is a serial killer, and it's likely that there were additional victims. An investigation into other cases of forced confessions revealed that 4 more innocent men were also wrongfully convicted. DNA evidence cleared them, but this crucial information was ignored by the Lake County prosecutor at the time. These 4 men spent a total of 75 years in prison and are now free. The case of Jorge Torres serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of violent crime and the long road to justice for victims and their families. Jorge's crimes, which include the brutal murders of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias in 2005, as well as the subsequent murder of Amanda Snell in 2009, went unsolved for years, leaving a trail of pain and confusion in their wake. His eventual conviction, made possible by DNA evidence, not only exonerated Jerry Hobbs, who was wrongfully imprisoned for the murders of the 2 young girls, but also revealed the extent of Jorge's crimes. The case underscores the vital role that forensic science plays in ensuring justice and preventing wrongful convictions, and serves as a stark reminder of the necessity of thorough investigations in the pursuit of the truth. Thanks to the persistence of law enforcement and the power of DNA testing, justice was finally served, although the damage done to the lives and spirits of those affected remains irreparable.